High above the rivers, forests, and ancient valleys of China lie places so otherworldly, so steeped in myth and natural grandeur, that they seem carved from the dreams of poets and the prayers of monks. These are not the cities and skylines known to the world, but hidden realms where mist drapes emerald peaks like silk, where temples cling to cliffs as if suspended by the will of heaven, and where nature and history embrace in quiet, sacred silence. From vast bamboo seas to crimson stone ridges that glow at sunset, from crater lakes veiled in snow to stairways of cloud that vanish into the pines, these unreal places form the forgotten heartbeat of China. In this journey, we'll travel deeper than the eye can see, through legends, lost paths, and landscapes so surreal they defy belief, exploring the country's most breathtaking and mysterious mountains, one extraordinary place at a time. But before we continue, subscribe to the channel and like the video. There is a place in the heart of southern Sichuan where the world transforms into an emerald ocean. Mount Yunnan, or Shunanshan, does not rise with jagged defiance like some of China's more dramatic peaks. Instead, it rolls like a gentle wave through the landscape, cloaked in endless groves of swaying bamboo. This is not merely a mountain, it is a realm unto itself, famous across China and beyond for its vast bamboo sea. When the morning mist rolls in, drifting over the countless green stalks that stretch across ridges and down valleys, it's easy to believe that one has stepped out of the real world entirely. Mount Yunnan is the centerpiece of the Shunanzhu, or Shunan Bamboo Sea Scenic Area, an expanse of over 120 square kilometers where more than 400 species of bamboo flourish. The ecological richness here is staggering. Entire hillsides are veiled in bamboo forests so dense and tall that they muffle the outside world, transforming every trail into a tunnel of green and every clearing into a quiet sanctuary. These forests are not only aesthetically magnificent, but also serve as vital carbon sinks and oxygen generators, playing a significant ecological role in the region. The air here is perpetually crisp and cool, even in the height of summer, perfumed with the gentle scent of vegetation and moistened by constant forest humidity. Ancient stone paths snake through the hills, some tracing routes that have existed for centuries, once used by monks and traders. Now, these winding trails offer visitors an immersive experience into a world where the only sounds are the rustle of leaves, the distant call of birds, and the occasional trickle of mountain springs. The mist that frequently drapes itself over Mount Yunnan gives the landscape an almost mythic aura. The ridgelines, often hidden in clouds, appear and vanish like ghostly guardians of the forest. This atmospheric quality has not gone unnoticed by artists and filmmakers. Mount Yunnan served as one of the filming locations for the acclaimed martial arts film Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, which perfectly captured the dreamlike nature of these bamboo groves. The sight of martial artists gliding across the tops of bamboo stalks may be fictional, but it reflects a poetic truth about this place. Mount Yunnan feels like a world where the laws of gravity and time are softened, where reality bends slightly to accommodate the fantastical. But this region is more than just bamboo. Within its hills are waterfalls that cascade from hidden cliffs, secret glades where deer gather in the early morning, and tiny shrines tucked into natural alcoves, remnants of a spiritual past where Taoist hermits once sought wisdom and seclusion in nature. These secluded temples, though fewer in number today, still exist in quiet corners, wrapped in moss and mystery. One of the most remarkable features of Mount Yunnan is its biodiversity. This ecological sanctuary is home to a variety of wildlife species, including the elusive clouded leopard, golden pheasant, and bamboo partridge. The intertwining root systems of the bamboo provide shelter for insects and small mammals, while birds soar through the upper canopy. In some areas, rare orchids bloom on shaded forest floors, and mushrooms sprout in glistening clusters along fallen logs. Scientists and naturalists continue to explore and catalogue the area, finding new species and understanding better how this forest functions as a living system. Visitors to Mount Yunnan can walk the canopy walkways that stretch above the bamboo forests, providing a bird's-eye view of the sea of green below. From these heights, the magnitude of the bamboo sea becomes apparent, an unbroken expanse of rhythmically swaying stalks stretching to the horizon. Cable cars and observation platforms further enhance the experience, allowing one to see how the terrain undulates beneath the forest cover like ocean waves frozen in time. Culturally, Mount Yunnan and the surrounding region are steeped in Sichuan's rich traditions. Local villages maintain age-old bamboo weaving techniques, crafting furniture, baskets, and even housing elements from the material that dominates their world. Tea cultivation is another time-honored practice in these hills, and visitors are often welcomed with cups of smoky, aromatic bamboo leaf tea, a local specialty thought to aid digestion and promote longevity. In the modern era, Mount Yunnan balances ecological preservation with tourism. The area has been carefully developed to ensure that foot traffic and facilities don't disrupt the delicate bamboo ecosystem. Raised paths and designated viewpoints minimize ecological damage, while guided eco-tours educate visitors about the complex interdependence of flora and fauna. Efforts are ongoing to maintain the integrity of this natural marvel even as it becomes more well-known beyond China's borders. In every season, Mount Yunnan offers a different face. Spring brings a flush of new growth, tender shoots pushing through the soil, feeding both pandas in sanctuaries and the culinary traditions of nearby towns. Summer veils the hills in thick mist and deep green. Autumn gilds the bamboo with touches of yellow and brown, while winter, though rare in its snows, leaves the bamboo dusted with frost, the forest hushed and reverent. This is a place that cannot be merely seen, it must be breathed, walked, and felt. Mount Yunnan is a quiet revolution against the noise of modern life. It speaks in whispers of wind through leaves, in the hush of rain falling through 1,000 green spears, in the softness of moss beneath one's feet. It invites the traveler not just to witness its beauty, but to become part of its rhythm, if only for a moment. High in the undulating landscapes of western Guizhou, where the sky seems just a little closer and the hills rise like frozen waves from a forgotten sea, lies Mount Jiangxi, the highest natural point in the entire province. Yet, for all its status and elevation, Mount Jiangxi remains one of the lesser-known summits in China, a mountain not marked by dramatic snowcaps or jagged alpine ridges but instead celebrated for its quiet majesty, gentle prominence, and the otherworldly landscape that surrounds it. At 2,900 meters above sea level, Mount Jiangxi is not towering by national standards, but in the context of Guizhou's labyrinth of karst mountains, this rounded summit reigns supreme. The mountain forms part of the Wuming Range, a complex series of folded and uplifted terrain that is known for its peculiar geology. Dense with limestone, riddled with caves, and sculpted into bizarre and mesmerizing forms over millions of years. By water, wind, and time, the karst formations here are softer than the stark pillars of Guilin or the dramatic arches of Zhangjiajie, but what they lack in vertical drama they more than make up for in sheer surrealism and scale. Mount Jiangxi is especially famous for the natural phenomenon that occurs every late summer and early autumn, when the mountain's expansive meadows burst into a radiant bloom of golden wildflowers. Chief among them is the vast sea of Eupatorium lindleyanum, a type of golden-shouldered plant locally called Jiangxi, which blankets the slopes in soft gold, like a carpet laid out for the sky. As the morning fog begins to burn away and the light slants down across the ridgelines, the flowers seem to glow with an inner light. The site has drawn comparisons to alpine meadows in Tibet or the dandelion fields of northern Europe, though Mount Jiangxi's version is unmistakably unique. From a distance, the summit of Jiangxi appears as a soft dome rising gently from the karst surroundings. But as one approaches, the richness of the land reveals itself. Rolling meadows stretch between rocky outcrops, and thin trails snake through pockets of pine and shrub. Herds of local livestock, sheep, goats, and the occasional yak, graze lazily on the mountain's gentle flanks, tended by Miao and Yi herders whose families have called this land home for centuries. Culturally, Mount Jiangxi sits at a crossroads of ethnic minority territories. The Miao, Yi, and Bui peoples have all left their imprint on the mountain's surrounding villages. These groups preserve distinct architectural traditions, timber homes with sloped tile roofs and open balconies, as well as vibrant textile arts, music, and culinary heritage. During the flower season, the mountain becomes not only a natural wonder but a site of local festivals and ancestral offerings. Drums echo through the valleys. Songs are sung to welcome the spirits of the land. And woven cloth dyed in deep indigo, embroidered with symbolic flora and fauna, is worn in celebration. Despite its accessibility and status, Mount Jiangxi retains a strong sense of seclusion. The climb to the summit is not technical, but it demands patience. There are no cable cars, no concrete paths cutting through its meadows, just a series of winding dirt trails, some cut by local farmers, others by nature herself. Hikers pass through shifting terrain. Grassy slopes give way to limestone ridges, dense groves of fir trees part to reveal sudden drops, and wildflowers flourish even in the cracks of exposed rock. This subtlety is part of Jiangxi's magic. It does not overwhelm the visitor with grandeur. it invites them into a quiet intimacy with the earth. From the summit, the view is nothing short of transcendent. On clear days, one can see all the way across to the deep karst valleys of Weining and beyond, a mosaic of terraced fields, craggy peaks, and scattered villages nestled in the folds of the land. When the fog rolls in, as it often does in the early hours, the world below disappears, leaving the summit floating in a sea of white. In these moments, Jiangxi becomes a mountain adrift, isolated in the sky. The ecology of Mount Jiangxi is of growing interest to scientists and conservationists. The combination of high elevation, moist subtropical climate, and karst geology has resulted in a patchwork of microclimates that support an impressive diversity of plant life. Medicinal herbs grow in abundance here, including species long used in traditional Chinese and minority herbal medicine. Butterflies, beetles, and birds follow the seasonal blooming cycles, while reptiles and amphibians thrive in the mossy crevices of the limestone ground. Environmental protection efforts are increasing in the area, particularly as the region begins to attract more eco-tourists and photographers. Local authorities have been careful to restrict the most sensitive areas from development, while community-based tourism initiatives have empowered villages around the mountain to benefit from its rising profile without sacrificing ecological health or cultural identity. A visit to Mount Jiangxi is an experience defined by subtlety, tranquility, and immersion. There is no blaring infrastructure, no neon signs or commercial vendors cluttering the paths. There is only the wind moving through the meadows, the distant jingle of a herder's bell, the slow drift of cloud shadows across the wildflower fields. This is a place that asks for silence and offers revelation in return. Unlike the tourist-saturated peaks of eastern China, Mount Jiangxi remains a place of solitude, reflection, and gentle beauty. It is a reminder that not all wonders come with thunderclaps or towering cliffs. Some rise slowly, quietly, into the sky, clothed in gold, surrounded by hills shaped like dreams, and holding stories in every stone and petal. Straddling the intersection of Sichuan, Chongqing, and Jiangxi provinces, Mount Daba, or the Dabashan Range, is not a single peak but a sprawling mountainous domain, a vast and brooding wilderness that rolls for hundreds of kilometers across southwestern China. This massif, veiled in deep forests and thick with mist for much of the year, is one of China's last great semi-wild frontiers, a place where human history and natural mystery have coexisted for millennia in near silence. Unlike the soaring Himalayas or the limestone icons of southern China, the Daba Mountains do not shout their presence. They hum with an ancient, slow-breathing power, more felt than seen. The Dabashan Range is often overlooked in tourist itineraries, and perhaps that is its greatest strength. These are not mountains that have been polished into postcard perfection. They are rugged, weathered, and layered with time. The landscape undulates with broad, forested ridgelines that fade into the distance like ripples in a green ocean. Their peaks are modest in elevation, rarely exceeding 2,500 meters, but their scope and ecological richness are staggering. These mountains stretch east to west, forming a natural barrier between the Sichuan Basin and the Qinling Range to the north, a geological and climatic transition zone that has fostered an exceptional variety of flora and fauna. The forests of Dabashan are among the most biodiverse in temperate China. Here, dense deciduous woodlands give way to conifer stands at higher elevations, and deep ravines shelter subtropical species that coexist with cold-adapted plants and animals. Some of China's most iconic and endangered species find refuge in these woods, among them the golden snub-nosed monkey, the Asiatic black bear, and elusive forest cats. Over 3,000 species of vascular plants thrive here, including countless medicinal herbs that have sustained traditional Chinese medicine for centuries. Botanists and mycologists are continually discovering new species within the Daba region, many of which exist nowhere else on Earth. But Mount Daba's importance transcends biology. This is a land steeped in human heritage, a place that has long served as a sanctuary for those seeking solitude, secrecy, or spiritual clarity. During the tumultuous dynastic transitions of Chinese history, scholars, monks, recluses, and hermits sought refuge in these mountains. The dense, hard-to-navigate terrain and the low population density made Dabashan an ideal location for those who wished to disappear from the world without vanishing entirely. Scattered across the ridges and hidden within ravines are countless ruins and still functioning retreats, Taoist and Buddhist temples carved into cliffs, hermit huts. Tucked under natural stone overhangs, ancient shrines overgrown with moss and framed by pine. Many of these sites are nearly inaccessible, reachable only by footpaths that twist through miles of thick forest and ascend perilous ledges. And yet, they are visited, not by the masses, but by pilgrims, hikers, and spiritual seekers drawn to the mountain's quiet majesty. The most famous of these historical sites include the Taipei Temple and Lingguan Temple, both located in the eastern Darbashan near Jiangxi, where Taoist practitioners believe the spiritual essence of the mountain resides. According to legend, it was in these secluded temples that ancient sages contemplated the Tao for decades at a time, their minds attuned to the rhythm of wind through trees and water over stone. Even now, the chants of monks echo through the misty forests during early mornings and late evenings, harmonizing with the cries of birds and the rustle of wildlife. The Darba Mountains also played a key role in modern Chinese history. During the Revolutionary era, especially throughout the 1930s and 1940s, the remoteness of this region provided strategic cover for guerrilla forces. Remnants of old military camps, dugouts, and communication posts can still be found, slowly returning to the forest. Today, some of these relics have been converted into modest museums or memorials, though many remain untouched, moss-covered, half-buried by time, and folded back into the wilderness that once concealed them. For those who venture into the Darbashan, the journey is as important as the destination. There are no major highways that cut through the heart of the range. Access often involves slow, winding mountain roads that rise above river gorges, pass through isolated farming villages, and skirt the borders of dense national forest reserves. Hiking and trekking routes are developing slowly here, thanks to growing ecotourism interest, but much of the terrain remains off-grid, ideal for adventurers seeking the raw, unfiltered experience of nature. In autumn, the Darbashan range erupts in fire-colored beauty. The maples, oaks, and wild cherry trees turn the hillsides into a canvas of crimson, amber, and gold. In winter, snow dusts the higher elevations, turning the forest into a monochrome dreamworld pierced by the dark green of evergreen needles. Spring brings the first blooms of mountain azaleas, and summer cloaks the entire range in mist, making every forest path feel like a passage through a dream. At night, far from city lights, the stars above Darbashan shimmer with a brilliance rarely seen elsewhere in China. The Milky Way spills across the sky, unbroken by pollution or skyscrapers, casting a soft, pale light on the treetops. It's a scene unchanged for millennia, a sky that once watched over recluses and revolutionaries alike, now bearing silent witness to the forest's slow, continuous breath. Though the Chinese government has designated large portions of the Darba Range as protected ecological zones and national parks, challenges remain. Illegal logging and habitat fragmentation have historically threatened this area, though increased awareness and conservation measures have helped to slow these impacts. Today, environmental scientists, community leaders, and local governments are working together to promote sustainable tourism and forest management, striving to preserve the integrity of Darbashan for generations to come. Mount Darba is not the kind of place that yields its beauty immediately. It reveals itself slowly, with patience and humility. Its grandeur is not in its height, but in its depth, in the forests that seem to breathe, the paths that have been walked for 1,000 years, and the silent temples that hold centuries of prayer in their stone walls. It is a place to be experienced not through sightseeing but through stillness. In Darbashan, one does not simply pass through the mountain. The mountain, in its quiet, ancient way, passes through you. Tucked away in the northeastern reaches of Hebei province, Mount Gaomi, or Gaomishan, rises not with the assertive sharpness of China's great sacred peaks, but with a dignified quietude. It is a mountain of hushed slopes, graceful ridgelines, and whispering winds, a place more often frequented by local wanderers and history-minded travelers than by crowds with cameras. Its understated profile belies a deeply textured past, one stitched with centuries of military legacy, seasonal beauty, and a relationship with nature that feels both deliberate and delicate. Mount Gaomi is part of a lesser-known section of the Taihang mountain system, though it breaks away from the more towering crags and folds into gentler terrain, making it accessible without losing its wild edge. The mountain's elevations are modest, but the ridgeline stretches far, tracing a spine through a landscape that subtly shifts from farmland and orchard groves into rugged forest, and finally, toward rocky cliffs that drop sharply into shaded ravines. In many places, the forest gives way suddenly to clearings filled with blossoming cherry trees in the spring or sunlit amber grasses in the fall, each season painting the mountain in its own fleeting palette. What makes Mount Gaomi so uniquely compelling is its fusion of natural serenity and martial history. The mountain bears the scars and bones of a time when the region was a frontier between dynasties and warring powers. Fortress ruins cling to its upper reaches, scattered across the ridgeline like broken crowns. These remnants are not grand citadels preserved by state funds, but crumbled watchtowers and ancient battlements whose stones have grown soft with moss and weathering. Some sections of the wall still stand defiantly against the horizon, their outlines silhouetted by cherry blossoms or mist, while others have collapsed into grassy mounds, forgotten, unrecorded, and yet deeply atmospheric. Historians believe that Mount Gaomi's fortifications date back to the late Tang and early Song dynasties, when this area formed a strategic edge in the vast web of defenses that protected imperial roads and vulnerable plain settlements. The fortress may have changed hands many times, claimed by local warlords, rebels, and imperial troops, each leaving their mark in the layered architecture and weathered inscriptions found on stone plaques hidden in some of the ruins. These sites, while not restored or touristic in the conventional sense, carry an authenticity that speaks louder than preservation ever could. The wind slips through arrow slits, roots climb between stone walls, wildflowers bloom where sentries once stood. There is a quiet spirituality here too. Gaomishan is not a religious mountain in the same way as Mount Tai or Mount Wutai, but its peaceful ambience and scenic overlooks have long drawn hermits and poets. Scattered hermitages, mostly abandoned, can still be found by those who explore deeper, tiny stone huts clinging to ledges or carved into the rock. In the more wooded sections, travelers might stumble upon stone steps overtaken by lichen, leading to shrines built centuries ago. Some still hold weathered statues of Guanyin or ancient tablets with Taoist script, half lost, but remarkably undisturbed. These modest, hidden shrines are not announced with signage or ceremony. They simply are, like the mountain itself, quiet, enduring, unfazed by time. Spring is, without a doubt, Gaomishan's most enchanting season. As March transitions into April, the mountain erupts with a delicate canopy of cherry blossoms. Unlike the sculpted and curated cherry parks of urban China, the blossoms here are raw and wild. Ancient cherry trees, many untended, their trunks twisted by years, dot the ridgeline, interspersed with evergreens and maple. When the wind picks up, the petals drift through the air like slow snow, covering old trails and fortress stones in a fragile pink blanket. It's a hauntingly beautiful sight, made even more poignant by the silence of the place. There are no crowds jostling for photos, only the occasional hiker pausing beneath the blossoms, as if in reverence. In summer, Gaomi turns lush and deep green. The trails are shaded, and the mountain hums with life. Cicadas, mountain thrushes, and the soft scurrying of small mammals across fallen leaves. Local herbalists know the mountain well, gathering medicinal plants from its slopes, including wild honeysuckle, mugwort, and goji berry shrubs that thrive in the temperate underbrush. The air is thick with the aroma of wet earth and growing things, and the streams that run down from the ridgeline burble with clarity, feeding small, hidden pools in the lower gullies. Autumn transforms the mountain again. The cherry trees, so pink and gentle in spring, turn a bright crimson, while the oak and maple cloak the ridges in copper and fire orange. Visibility increases as the humidity drops, revealing long sightlines to the surrounding Hebei plains and the distant Taihang foothills. The ancient watchtowers seem sharper in this light, their jagged silhouettes etched against the pale sky. Winters, though relatively mild compared to the far northern provinces, bring a different kind of silence. Snowfall is intermittent but not uncommon. When it comes, it covers the ruins and paths in a light powder, muting sound and leaving only the crows and pine branches to break the stillness. In these months, the mountain becomes almost monastic, emptied of all but the most dedicated pilgrims or locals gathering winter herbs. The cold seems to heighten the spiritual quiet of Gaomishan, wrapping it in a white, breathless stillness. Efforts to conserve Mount Gaomi have been modest but meaningful. Local cultural preservation groups have begun documenting the more endangered fortress sites, and there is increasing academic interest in the oral histories passed down by families who've lived for generations in villages on the mountain's lower slopes. Some of these stories speak of hidden tunnels beneath the fortress ruins, of legendary jewels, and even of secret Buddhist relics buried in small caves to protect them from ancient wars. Whether these are myth or memory is difficult to say, but they color the mountain's aura with a layer of intrigue that no signboard could provide. Mount Gaomi is not the kind of place you see. It's the kind you feel beneath your feet, in the wind brushing past ruined walls, in the shifting shadow of petals falling on old stone, in the stillness that settles over the land at dusk. It does not demand attention. It offers it quietly, gently, to those who choose to slow down, to notice, and to listen. Rising gracefully from the northern plains just beyond the bustling cityscape of Tianjin, Mount Pan, known traditionally as Panshan, is one of China's most historically revered and aesthetically celebrated peaks. Its prominence is not born from staggering height or remote wilderness, but from a blend of spiritual resonance, imperial admiration, classical artistry, and natural elegance that has captivated emperors, monks, poets, and painters for centuries. Panshan stands as both a geographic landmark and a cultural beacon, one whose legacy spans dynasties and whose quiet beauty endures long after the fanfare of imperial courts has faded into history. Located about 120 kilometers southeast of Beijing, Mount Pan lies in a transitional zone between the northern plains and the rising hills of the Yangshan Range. Its elevation is modest, just over 800 meters at its highest point, Guayua Peak, but its silhouette is unmistakably graceful. The mountain is said to form the shape of a reclining Buddha, with gentle slopes rolling like the folds of a monk's robe and rocky spurs forming limbs in repose. This likeness, along with the mountain's harmonious proportions and the 5 main peaks that crown it, has long inspired associations with Taoist cosmology, geomantic balance, and imperial feng shui. Panshan's fame stretches deep into Chinese antiquity, but it rose to particular prominence during the Tang and Qing dynasties. Tang dynasty poets such as Li Bai and Du Fu wrote of its serene landscapes and winding streams. The mountain's mist-shrouded groves and scattered temples became subjects for inkwash paintings and court poetry alike. But it was during the Qing era that Mount Pan reached its zenith in imperial favor, thanks largely to the Qianlong Emperor, whose deep personal connection to the mountain elevated its status from regional treasure to imperial playground. The Qianlong Emperor visited Mount Pan more than 30 times throughout his long reign, often incorporating pilgrimages to the mountain as part of his inspection tours of northern China. Enamored with its blend of sacred Taoist energy and refined natural beauty, he declared that visiting Mount Pan was the equivalent of seeing the 5 great mountains of China in one place. The famous imperial quote, "If one has visited Mount Pan, there is no need to see the other 5 sacred mountains," was etched into stone steles and temple gates, cementing the mountain's legendary stature. At the heart of Mount Pan's spiritual identity is Taoism. For over 1,000 years, the mountain has been home to temples, grottos, and sanctuaries dedicated to Taoist sages and celestial deities. These sites are scattered across the slopes, often reached by staircases carved directly into the rock, winding past waterfalls, pine groves, and stone bridges. The most revered of these is the Chancheng Temple, an ancient Taoist sanctuary that clings to the mountain's eastern side. Its curved eaves, red-lacquered beams, and incense-filled altars offer a glimpse into the mountain's ongoing spiritual life. Monks in grey robes still reside here, tending to prayer rituals and sacred texts as pilgrims ascend the long stone staircases to offer prayers for health, longevity, and clarity. One of Panshan's most iconic features is the ancient path known as the 18 Bends, a serpentine stone trail that coils up the mountain's face like a dragon's spine. Lined with twisted pine trees, stone lanterns, and century-old inscribed tablets, this trail offers more than just a route to the summit. It is a pilgrimage of its own. Each bend reveals a new vista, a different angle of light, a sudden burst of color from wildflowers or autumn leaves. The climb is challenging but not overwhelming, designed to induce both physical exertion and contemplative calm, mirroring Taoist principles of balance and flow. The natural scenery of Mount Pan is not overpowering. It is refined, cultivated by centuries of quiet reverence. Tall pines lean against smooth granite cliffs. Springs emerge from cracks in the stone and fall in slender ribbons into mossy pools. The mountain changes dramatically with the seasons. In spring, the cherry blossoms and magnolias drape the hills in pink and white veils. In summer, the forests are thick with the sound of cicadas and the smell of warm pine resin. In autumn, golden maples and red oaks blanket the mountain in a blaze of color that reflects in the still waters of the streams. And in winter, snow outlines every roof tile and tree branch in calligraphic strokes of silence. Along with Taoism, Buddhism has also left its imprint on Mount Pan. Several smaller Buddhist temples dot the ridges, and the coexistence of these two spiritual traditions, Taoist and Buddhist, gives the mountain a layered and inclusive sacred atmosphere. It is not unusual to see a Taoist priest passing a Buddhist monk on the trail, each offering a bow, each continuing their journey upward. This quiet coexistence mirrors the mountain's own essence: diverse, balanced, embracing contrast without conflict. Culturally, Mount Pan also served as an inspiration for literati gatherings during imperial times. Scholar officials often retreated here to escape court politics, write poetry, paint, and seek spiritual clarity. Ancient stone tablets still inscribed with their verses can be found embedded in the mountainside or beneath small pagodas. Their calligraphy, often faded and overgrown, remains a living testimony to the emotional and philosophical communion that the mountain once offered, and still does. Modern visitors to Mount Pan can still access this layered experience. Though tourism infrastructure has increased over the years, stone steps have been reinforced, signs installed, and cable cars introduced, the essence of the mountain remains remarkably intact. Many areas, particularly beyond the main tourist paths, remain wild, unspoiled, and filled with a stillness that invites inward reflection. Whether sitting beneath a centuries-old pine, meditating in a temple courtyard, or simply listening to the wind move through the valley, visitors today can access the same kind of sacred stillness that once moved emperors to write poetry in praise of the clouds. Efforts have been made in recent years to conserve the ecological and historical integrity of Mount Pan. Restoration of key temples has been undertaken with sensitivity to original materials and methods, and conservation zones have been established to protect rare plant species and fragile habitats. Seasonal festivals celebrate the mountain's legacy, often blending traditional performances, Taoist rituals, and guided poetry walks through the flowering hills. Ultimately, Mount Pan is not simply a scenic destination, it is a cultural and spiritual archive carved into stone and soil. It is the embodiment of refined beauty, a place where nature and human reverence have co-authored something timeless. It remains one of those rare places where past and present coexist gracefully, where every path leads to both a physical height and a spiritual horizon. In the vast expanse of Inner Mongolia, where the grasslands stretch like an undulating green sea and the sky feels impossibly high and close, rises Mount Heihe, High Hessian, a gentle but commanding highland massif that serves as a geological and ecological anchor amid the windswept plains. Unlike the jagged peaks of southern China or the volcanic cones of the northeast, Mount Heihe is a high plateau mountain, broad and open, edged with grassy shoulders and crowned with weathered ridges. Its summit is not a solitary spire but a long, sprawling elevation that blends into the surrounding steppe, making it seem less like a mountain in the traditional sense and more like a sky island floating above a world of endless horizon. High Hessian holds a unique place in Inner Mongolia's topography. It is a rare highland oasis in a region dominated by open prairie, dotted with yurts and grazing herds. The mountain's elevation, rising above 2,000 meters, grants it a climate distinct from the steppe below. Cooler, wetter, and far more ecologically diverse than its flatland surroundings, Mount Heihe shelters alpine wetlands, seasonal flower meadows, and highland forests that seem almost out of place in this part of the country. For biologists and conservationists, this mountain is a jewel, a compact zone of biodiversity nestled within the greater arid and semi-arid landscapes of northern China. To ascend Mount Heihe is to watch the world subtly transform. From the base, one walks through rolling grassland, rich with wild herbs, wildflowers, and windblown grasses that ripple like silk. Nomadic encampments appear as tiny clusters of white domes in the distance. Mongolian yurts whose placement feels both strategic and poetic, often near streams or wind-protected slopes. Herds of sheep, yaks, and horses graze freely, their silhouettes moving slowly against the background of an ever-changing sky. As the elevation increases, the grasses grow shorter and the air cooler. Marshy patches emerge, fed by the mountain's numerous hidden springs and seasonal meltwater. These alpine wetlands, rare and critically important, are filled with sedges, reeds, and mosses that trap moisture and provide breeding grounds for birds and amphibians. Migratory species, such as cranes, egrets, and shelducks, make seasonal stops here, transforming the quiet wetlands into moments of vibrant, winged chaos each spring and autumn. Insects buzz, frogs call, and the air hums with life, an unexpected richness on a mountain that from afar seems so tranquil and tame. The mountain's name, Heihe, means Black River, and it refers to the small but vital river system born in these uplands. The Heihe River originates in the folds of the mountain's northern flanks and flows through the wetlands before winding its way across the plains. Its dark, mineral-rich waters nourish the valleys below and are revered by both herders and ecologists alike. Along its banks, medicinal plants grow in abundance. Surreal involucrata, known as snow lotus, clings to rocky outcrops in the upper slopes, while gentian, motherwort, and rhodiola flourish closer to the water's edge. Culturally, Mount Heihe sits at a convergence of Mongolian, Han Chinese, and various Turkic influences. The surrounding area has long been inhabited by nomadic tribes, and the mountain itself has held spiritual significance as a sacred protector of the land. In local oral traditions, Hai Heshen is described as the sleeping guardian, a gentle giant that watches over the valleys and grasslands, blessing them with water, grass, and wind. It is common for older generations of herders to stop at certain boulders or wind-bent trees along the mountain's trails and leave offerings, tufts of horsehair, woven threads, or small piles of stone, as acts of reverence and remembrance. Despite its relative obscurity in mainstream tourism, Hai Heshen has become increasingly important to environmental researchers and cultural preservationists. The mountain is part of several ongoing ecological monitoring programs aimed at understanding high-altitude wetland systems in northern China, ecosystems that are particularly vulnerable to climate change, overgrazing, and resource extraction. Recent surveys have discovered a surprising number of rare and endemic species, as well as signs of long-term hydrological shifts that could affect the entire region's water supply. Visiting Mount Heihe is not a casual undertaking. There are few marked trails, and no large-scale infrastructure. Most who explore the mountain either hire local guides, usually herders familiar with its contours, or set out with the intention of moving slowly and attentively, allowing the land to reveal itself in stages. There are no ticket booths, no souvenir stands, no cafes tucked into scenic overlooks. Instead, the reward is a profound and immersive stillness, interrupted only by the occasional cry of a hawk or the echo of hoofbeats across distant valleys. In summer, the high meadows bloom with alpine flowers, bright yellow arnica, lavender blue aster, pink corydalus, and delicate white edelweiss, creating a transient mosaic that seems to hover just below the clouds. In these months, the mountain becomes a sanctuary not only for wildlife but for local families seeking cooler air and clean water. Children play by mountain streams, women gather wild herbs, and elders sit in the sun, recounting ancestral stories of the mountain spirits and star patterns. Autumn comes early to Mount Heihe, ushered in by crisp winds and a gradual bronzing of the grass. Migratory birds begin their long flights, and the mountain slowly quiets. Frost crystals appear on the morning reeds, and the mountain's colors fade into a tapestry of gold, brown, and silver. Winter, though beautiful, is harsh here. Snow blankets the higher slopes, and ice forms on the wetland pools, transforming the mountain into a frozen tableau where only the hardiest species survive. Herders descend to lower pastures, and the mountain sleeps under a thick, cold silence. Efforts to protect Mount Heihe's fragile ecosystems are growing but remain under-resourced. Environmental NGOs, working alongside local officials, have proposed the creation of a protected highland nature reserve to shield the wetlands and rare flora from overuse and climate stress. There are also discussions about reviving ancient pastoral practices, rotational grazing, natural fencing, and seasonal movement patterns, to ensure that the mountain's ecological rhythms are not overwhelmed by the demands of modern expansion. Mount Heihe stands as a testament to quiet majesty. It does not flaunt its wonders, but reveals them through patient observation. The glimmer of dew on morning grasses, the hush of reeds swaying in alpine wind, the long shadows of herders returning at dusk. It is a place where the rhythm of the land continues largely unchanged, where time feels stretched and softened by the contours of sky and earth. For those willing to venture beyond the obvious and listen closely, Hai Heshen offers a voice older than dynasties, steadier than empires, and gentler than most mountains would dare to be. Just beyond the outermost ripple of Beijing's urban sprawl, where the noise of the city thins and the concrete finally yields to the contours of ancient land, rises Mount Yunnanshan, a mountain wrapped in myth, mist, and pine. Though it lies only a few hours from the Chinese capital, Yunnanshan feels like a realm apart, steeped in quiet majesty and the ageless breath of nature. Known for its evocative pine forests, weather-carved rock formations, and the ethereal mist that rolls through its valleys and ridgelines like a slow-moving river, Yunnanshan is both a retreat and a revelation, drawing in those who seek something more profound than a scenic hike. The name Yunmeng translates roughly to cloudy dreams, and it could not be more apartment. The mountain is often cloaked in thick white mist, especially in the early morning or after a rain. These veils of vapor drift through the trees, curl around the jagged rocks, and rise from the forested slopes like incense smoke from a temple censer. The effect is mesmerizing. Peaks appear and vanish like illusions. Pathways dissolve into fog. Trees take on the shifting silhouettes of dancers or sleeping beasts. Yunnanshan does not merely show you beauty, it invites you into a landscape of dreams, half seen and fully felt. The mountain is located within the broader Yunnanshan National Forest Park, a protected area in the Miyun district of northern Beijing. This region forms part of the larger Yangshan mountain range, which separates the North China Plain from the Mongolian Plateau. While the Yangshan range is known for its geological complexity and historical significance, Yunnanshan stands out for its unique blend of terrain and microclimate. With elevations ranging from 400 to 1,400 meters, the mountain offers a rich vertical spectrum, cooler and moister than the plains below, and filled with plant and animal life rarely seen so close to a metropolis. The pine forests of Yunnanshan are among its most iconic features. These are not young plantations, but ancient, gnarled stands of Chinese red pine and larch that cling to the cliffs and ridges with an almost defiant grace. Their branches twist into the fog like calligraphy strokes, and their roots grip stone and soil alike, forming silent witness to the passage of time. These trees have endured dynasties, wars, and centuries of pilgrims' footsteps. Some are adorned with red prayer ribbons tied by visitors hoping for blessings, fertility, or wisdom. Others grow in perfect isolation, their needles brushing the sky, their trunks flanked by ferns and moss. Beyond the trees, the mountain reveals its other masterpiece, stone. The geology of Yunnanshan is one of expressive drama. Great boulders piled like sleeping giants, weathered cliffs that split the horizon, narrow ridgelines where one wrong step could send a hiker into a sea of mist. Many of these formations have earned poetic names over the centuries, shaped as much by imagination as by wind and time. One might pass a rock said to resemble an elephant kneeling in prayer, or a cliff face known as the Stone Curtain, which glows gold in the afternoon light. Local legend has it that immortals once trained on these peaks, their bodies turning to stone in moments of perfect stillness. These myths are no accident. Yunnanshan has long held spiritual significance, especially within Taoist and Buddhist traditions. Hermits and monks once sought refuge here, carving tiny temples and stone meditation platforms into the cliffsides. Remnants of these ascetic retreats still remain, hidden in folds of the mountain that few visitors find. Crumbling steps, incense-blackened alcoves, ancient water cisterns fed by mountain springs. These details linger in silence, echoing the time when solitude was sought not as escape, but as transformation. Yunnanshan's trails invite both meditation and movement. Winding paths of stone stairs and wooden bridges meander through forests, over ridgelines, and across waterfalls that cascade in cool silver ribbons. These are not hurried trails, they ask for presence. The climb to Jiangxi, Heavenly Lake, is one of the park's highlights, offering a tranquil mountain pool nestled among steep rock faces. On clear days, the sky reflects perfectly in its still surface, while mist days turn the lake into a mirror of fog and shadow. Another iconic route leads to Qixinfeng, Seven Immortals Peak, a narrow, jagged summit that seems to pierce the clouds. From here, on rare clear mornings, one can see far across the ridges, deep into the Yangshan range, and even glimpse the distant outlines of Beijing's suburban edges. But it is in the mist, not in the clarity, that Yunnanshan feels most alive. The landscape becomes less visual and more tactile, every step muffled, every breath carrying the scent of pine and wet stone, every rock slick with cloud moisture. It is in this dreamlike atmosphere that the mountain spirit reveals itself, elusive, profound, and intimate. The biodiversity of Yunnanshan is impressive for its proximity to an urban center. More than 800 plant species have been documented here, from medicinal herbs like angelica and codonopsis to delicate alpine flowers that bloom in shaded glades. The undergrowth is rich with mushrooms in the wetter seasons, and wild fruits, hawthorn, chestnut, wild kiwi, grow in the forest's edge. Animal life includes foxes, wild hares, civets, and over 150 species of birds. Birdsong weaves through the mist like a natural symphony, particularly in spring when migration fills the forest with flutters and trills. Historically, Yunnanshan was appreciated not just for its scenery but for its literary inspiration. Ming and Qing dynasty poets wrote of its cloud-hidden streams and stone paths without end. Artists painted its valleys with minimalist brushstrokes, leaving white space to represent the ever-present fog. These cultural layers deepen the mountain's character. It is not merely a backdrop to life, it has been a protagonist in art, a muse for solitude, a silent partner to generations of thinkers, recluses, and dreamers. Today, Yunnanshan is accessible to the public but not overrun. Unlike more commercialized mountains closer to major tourist circuits, Yunnanshan retains an aura of restraint. There are no loud vendors or neon signs. Facilities are minimal, paths are well maintained but not sterilized, and much of the mountain still feels wild in the best sense, unrushed, unspoiled, and willing to share its mysteries only with those who approach with humility. In every season, the mountain offers something different. Spring brings new growth and delicate blossoms tucked among the moss. Summer cloaks the trails in vibrant green and the soothing hum of cicadas. Autumn ignites the hillsides with fire-red maples and golden larch needles. Winter, when snow dusts the ridgelines and silence deepens, reveals a skeletal beauty, the bones of the mountain laid bare under white sky. Mount Yunmeng is not simply a scenic sight. It is an experience, a mountain that breathes with the rhythm of cloud and forest, that speaks in pine needle whispers and stone silence. To walk its trails is to walk into a painting still being composed by mist and wind, a dream space where reality softens and the soul finds its echo in the mountain's quiet, enduring presence. Tucked deep within the folds of Yunnan province, far from the crowded peaks that fill travel brochures and mass itineraries, lies the quiet, introspective wonder of Mount Huagaishan. It is a mountain that does not announce itself with grandeur or popularity, but rather reveals its majesty slowly, like a monk lifting the corner of a robe to show the calligraphy etched beneath. A lesser-known sacred site, Huagaishan is defined not by fame, but by presence. Vertical stone faces that rise like petrified curtains, solemn temples embraced by nature's hush, and trails that weave through a landscape where time seems to fold in on itself. The name Huagai translates to canopy, and it is not difficult to see why. From a distance, the mountain appears veiled, its ridges draped in mist and forest cover, its rock cliffs rising like an open fan against the sky. The entire massif has the shape of something protective, sheltering not just flora and fauna, but an ancient atmosphere of sanctity. Unlike louder peaks that boast of their height or geology, Mount Huagai is more reticent, more internal. Its power lies in what it withholds, in the spaces between sight and silence. Situated in a more rural and secluded part of Yunnan, Huagaishan is rarely visited by tourists, but is cherished by those with spiritual inclination, artistic sensibility, or a longing for solitude. The journey to its base is often winding, through terraced fields and small hamlets where time appears to have paused in reverence. As the roads narrow and the air thins, the presence of the mountain becomes visceral, its cliffs rising stark and sheer from the green earth, like enormous book pages etched with the calligraphy of wind and weather. The most striking feature of Huagaishan is its stone faces, vertical cliffs of pale granite or weathered limestone that loom without warning from the forested slopes. These are not gentle hills, but great walls that have stood for millennia, their surfaces marked by fissures, streaks of mineral color, and the slow sculpting of rain. To walk at the base of these cliffs is to feel dwarfed by nature's scale, and to look up is to sense the patience of stone, how it has watched generations come and go, how it absorbs sun and shadow alike. Yet amidst this raw geological drama, human hands have left gentle marks. Small temples cling to ledges, some built right into the cliffside like nests of prayer tucked against the mountain's chest. The most notable of these is the Huagai Temple, a humble yet ancient Taoist sanctuary that seems to grow out of the stone itself. Its wooden eaves are faded but graceful, bearing carved dragon motifs and fluttering prayer flags. Incense curls from its doors even when no one is seen nearby, carried by mountain wind into the dense forest like a silent offering. These temples were not meant for spectacle. They were places of retreat, of internal alchemy, of quiet transformation. It is said that sages and hermits once climbed here not for safety, but to step beyond the rhythms of ordinary time. They would sit for days facing the rock walls, reading in them the sutras written by erosion and moss. Meditation platforms carved into the cliffs remain, modest shelves of stone where one can sit cross-legged, feet dangling over an abyss, with only wind and the rustle of birds for company. Surrounding these sacred places is a natural realm alive with sound and stillness. The forest that climbs Huagaishan's lower slopes is a mix of deciduous and evergreen, its understory rich with ferns, orchids, and medicinal herbs. Birds sing in sudden bursts, then disappear into silence. Streams run down through moss-laden gullies, their water so clear it reflects the leaves like painted glass. In spring, wildflowers bloom in stone cracks, and in autumn, the forest ignites with color, fiery reds, golds, and rusts mirrored on the blank cliff faces above. The biodiversity here is often overlooked due to the region's remoteness, but it is significant. Because of the mountain's relative isolation and undisturbed ecology, small populations of rare animals survive in its shadows. Masked palm civets, clouded leopards, and species of butterflies found nowhere else in China. The verticality of the terrain creates unique microclimates, where temperature and humidity vary dramatically in a matter of meters, allowing pockets of unique flora to thrive on different ledges and niches. This natural sanctuary, untouched by the march of commercialization, remains an ecological time capsule. Hiking through Huagaishan is less about conquering a summit and more about moving through a sequence of moods. The trails are not always marked, and often fade into deer paths or weather-worn staircases. At times the path hugs a cliff so tightly that one must lean into the stone to pass. At others, it opens onto sudden viewpoints, silent balconies where the horizon unfolds in green waves of forest and farmland. There is no rush here. Each step invites awareness. Each turn feels like an entrance into another layer of the mountain's quiet psyche. Weather, too, plays a major role in shaping the experience. Morning mists often roll in like tides, hiding then revealing the cliffs with theatrical slowness. Rain transforms the rocks into mirrors, catching and holding the light. Even the wind has voice here, sometimes humming through the pines with a song that seems almost deliberate, like breath moving through a bamboo flute. On moonlit nights, the cliffs glow with a cold silver sheen, and shadows dance across the temple eaves, cast by flickering lanterns or the imagined figures of those who once walked here in search of something wordless. Local folklore holds that Huagaishan is a mountain where prayers rise faster. This belief has led generations of villagers and seekers to leave offerings, tiny rice bundles, handwritten notes, talismans made of twine and stone, at the base of certain rock formations. These gifts are not removed or catalogued. They are left to the elements, slowly returned to nature, as if the mountain itself digests the longing and offers something subtler in return: peace, clarity, or a moment of unshakable stillness. Few guidebooks mention Huagaishan. It does not have the fame of Zhangjiaji's peaks or the crowds of Huangshan. But therein lies its strength. It is not a place for selfies or hurried day trips. It is a mountain for those willing to listen, to walk slowly, to let the mountain speak in its own time. And when it does, its voice is not thunderous, but it echoes in the heart long after the climb is done. On the vast northeastern frontier of China, where the air becomes crisper and the landscape more ethereal with each kilometer traveled, the Changbai Mountains rise like a snow-laced dream. Most travelers know of Changbai for its iconic Heaven Lake, a high-altitude crater lake cupped in the caldera of an extinct volcano that straddles the border between China and North Korea. But fewer venture beyond the well-trodden eastern routes and observation decks. Fewer still find their way to the Changbai West Ridge, a quieter, more intimate realm of this colossal range, where nature retains its primal wildness and the silence is broken only by the crunch of snow, the flap of raven wings, or the muffled roar of wind rushing through ancient forests. Mount Changbai's West Ridge, located within Jilin province, is a realm apart from the bustling tourism of the main eastern entrance. Here, instead of queues and tour buses, there are pine-strewn trails, half-buried stone shrines, and forgotten paths once used by shamans and border sentinels. The entire range is volcanic in origin, with the massive Changbai volcano forming the central massif. The western slopes descend in waves of ridgelines and ravines, covered in dense boreal forests that stretch out like an emerald sea beneath the watchful peaks. Snow lingers longer here than in other parts of China, often well into spring, and the air holds the sharpness of Siberian winters even in the warmer months. What makes the West Ridge so compelling is its untouched quality. Unlike the eastern side, where Heaven Lake is framed by railings and camera flashes, the western face offers unfiltered access to the mountain's soul. The ascent is more rugged, the roads narrower, and the facilities sparse, but what awaits is authenticity. Along the upper reaches, crater lakes untouched by human infrastructure sit quietly in ancient bowls of stone, their surfaces often frozen into silver mirrors reflecting pine silhouettes and mounting clouds. These lesser-known lakes, some of them perched at altitudes above 2,000 meters, are relics of past eruptions, formed when molten fury gave way to silence. The geological presence of the Qiangbai West Ridge is still palpable. Even now, fumaroles sometimes hiss from unseen vents, and warm springs trickle through the snow at odd intervals, their heat sustaining delicate mosses and ferns in an otherwise frozen biome. The volcanic stone underfoot is dark, porous, and alive with mineral hues, reds, blacks, greys, and yellows, all interwoven with tufts of grass and wildflowers in summer, or buried beneath feet of snow come winter. The smell of sulfur occasionally drifts on the breeze, a reminder that this mountain, though slumbering, is not dead. Forests cloak the West Ridge in mystery and movement. These are taiga forests, dominated by Korean pines, birches, and Mongolian oaks, interspersed with spruce and larch. In spring and summer, the forest floor bursts into a carpet of wildflowers, deep blue gentians, delicate orchids, and fiery red lilies that seem to burn against the green. In autumn, the entire mountainside becomes a painting of gold and crimson, leaves falling like slow rain onto paths used only by deer, wolves, and the occasional ranger. Winter, however, is the mountain's true season. The West Ridge is transformed into a white cathedral of stillness. Snow hangs from branches in soft folds, ice sheathes the rock faces, and the sky turns pale with the low arc of the sun. It is in this hushed season that one might spot the rare Siberian tiger's tracks, or glimpse a red fox trotting between the trees. Snowshoe hares, camouflaged perfectly, dart from beneath bushes. High above, black eagles and buzzards circle in slow spirals. The cold bites, but the silence is profound, monastic in its weight and clarity. Perhaps the greatest allure of this region is its spiritual solitude. Local folklore still pulses through the mountain's stones. The Manchu people, who once ruled this land and whose name Qiangbai itself means eternally white, considered the mountain sacred. The western slope, more hidden and difficult to access, was often seen as the domain of mountain spirits, guardians of the forest, water, and wind. Shamanic rituals were once performed in its clearings, using drums made of deer hide and chants passed down through generations. Even today, one can find remnants of these old traditions, tree trunks wrapped in prayer cloths, or small mounds of stones left as offerings beside remote trails. Unlike the more modernized eastern side, the West Ridge has kept alive its archaic intimacy. Small wooden cabins exist deep in the forest, once used by hunters and now serving as rest points for intrepid hikers or rangers. These shelters are often unmarked, accessible only to those who know the land. Inside, one might find bundles of dried herbs hanging from rafters, old carvings on the beams, and journals from past visitors whose words echo with awe and reverence. "I came to see a mountain," one entry reads, "but I met something older than memory." Climbing the West Ridge is an exercise in humility. The trails are not for the casual tourist. The ascent begins gently, winding through meadows and marshes, then gradually steepens into switchbacks through forests cloaked in fog. As altitude increases, the tree line fades, and stunted shrubs give way to rocky plateaus. In good weather, the views open dramatically, ridge after ridge unfurling into the distance, Heaven Lake visible far to the east like a coin tossed into the caldera of time. On a cloudy day, the mountain becomes a labyrinth of mist, where trails vanish and reappear like lines in an unfinished poem. Then there are the hidden glacial valleys, choked with scree and ancient snow, where the wind whistles between granite teeth and echoes off unseen walls. These are places where human presence feels like intrusion, and where the immensity of geologic time presses down like a silent bell. At night, the stars blaze with a clarity unknown in the cities, so brilliant they cast shadows on the snow. The Milky Way arcs overhead like the trail of a forgotten fire god. Despite its remoteness, there is growing interest in preserving the Qiangbai West Ridge. Conservation efforts have been quietly expanding, with new protective zones designated for the region's rare flora and fauna. Small eco-tourism outfits, run by locals, offer guided treks that emphasize sustainability, traditional knowledge, and low-impact travel. These guides often share legends, identify medicinal plants, and point out hidden waterfalls tucked beneath thick canopies of pine. What the West Ridge ultimately offers is a return, not just to nature, but to a more elemental understanding of place. Here, one is not just a visitor, but a participant in a vast, ongoing dialogue between mountain and sky, between stillness and movement, between what we see and what we feel. There is no internet signal, no tourist shop, no sound but the breath of wind through the trees. And in that silence, something ancient stirs, something that reminds us why mountains have always drawn seekers, poets, wanderers, and dreamers. To walk the slopes of the Chiangbai West Ridge is to step into a story still being written by frost, fire, and forest. It is not a destination. It is a pilgrimage. Mount Yaoshan, nestled deep within the embrace of northern Jiangxi, rises like a sleeping dragon draped in terraces and mist. It is not the tallest peak in the region, nor the most treacherous or famous, but few mountains in China capture such an ethereal interplay between human craftsmanship and natural grandeur. Near Longxing, a county famed for its stunning rice terraces and ethnic diversity, Mount Yaoshan reigns as the scenic heart of a landscape shaped by centuries of quiet cultivation, prayerful tradition, and the constant drifting veil of mountain fog. Yaoshan is often called the backbone of Longxing, its silhouette forming a protective barrier between the region's deep valleys and the sprawling karst hills beyond. Unlike the razor-sharp limestone peaks typical of southern China, Yaoshan's topography undulates in soft, generous folds, rolling ridges like waves frozen in time. These peaks are not barren or rocky but sheathed in dense, moisture-loving vegetation, ferns, bamboo thickets, moss-draped pines, and scattered camellia trees that bloom scarlet in winter. In summer, wild azaleas light the slopes in delicate pink and white, while hidden trails wind among the underbrush, used for centuries by farmers, monks, and traveling healers. One cannot speak of Mount Yaoshan without evoking the rice terraces, those marvels of engineering that crown the lower slopes in concentric arcs. The Longji rice terraces, or Dragon's Backbone terraces, though more directly associated with nearby villages like Ping'an and Dazhai, also stretch onto the lower skirts of Yaoshan. The mountain provides both the water source and the fertile microclimate that make these stepped paddies thrive. Standing on a high ridge during planting season, when the terraces are flooded and mirror the sky, one sees not just agriculture, but artistry. The reflection of clouds upon water, broken only by the silhouettes of farmers in conical hats, creates an image that seems almost painted, unreal in its serene precision. The terraces change with the seasons, and so too does the mountain's mood. In spring, soft rains descend in veils, feeding the water channels and coaxing new rice shoots from the soil. Mist clings to the upper ridges like a shawl, and the morning air is thick with the scent of damp earth and pine needles. Summer brings brilliant green to the mountain's layered skirts, and the sound of insects humming through the warm dusk. Autumn turns the terraces to gold, a living mosaic shimmering in the sun. And in winter, the frost creeps quietly down from Yaoshan's upper shoulders, freezing the pools and dusting the tree branches in silver. But beyond the natural beauty lies a deeper resonance. Mount Yaoshan is sacred to many of the region's ethnic minorities, including the Zhuang, Yao, and Miao peoples. In fact, the mountain takes its name from the Yao ethnic group, who have long lived on and around its slopes. The Yao people are known for their rich oral traditions, embroidered clothing, and animistic spiritual practices. To them, Yaoshan is more than a landmark. It is an ancestral protector, a sacred place where rituals are held to honor sky gods, mountain spirits, and the souls of the departed. It is common even now to find altars tucked into quiet groves or prayer flags tied around the base of ancient trees. During certain festivals, especially the Panwang festival, which honors the Yao people's legendary ancestor, pilgrims ascend Yaoshan's ridges bearing offerings and chanting age-old hymns. These ceremonies are often accompanied by the rhythmic beating of drums and the melodic calls of reed flutes, their sounds drifting on the wind and echoing down the valley like whispers from a time before the written word. Exploring Yaoshan's upper trails can feel like traversing a world outside of time. Some paths are little more than narrow goat tracks, others are lined with moss-covered stones from old trade routes. There are hidden waterfalls that tumble into deep ravines, their waters cool and sweet with the taste of highland minerals. Small wooden pavilions, built centuries ago for scholars or monks seeking inspiration, still stand in secluded spots, quiet platforms from which to gaze out across an ocean of terraces, forests, and fog. And the fog, perhaps the most defining feature of Yaoshan, is ever present. At dawn, it moves slowly and purposefully, curling between the tree trunks, rising from the valleys like incense smoke. It softens every edge, cloaks every sound, and turns even a short walk into a meditation. Locals say the mountain breathes through this fog, that it exhales its ancient memories into the sky each morning and reclaims them each night. To walk through Yaoshan in mist is to disappear, not in body, but in spirit, to shed for a moment the weight of identity, of language, of history. For photographers, Yaoshan is a dream. The layers of ridges fading into grey-blue distance, the play of sunlight on terraced water, the fleeting glimpses of distant villages wreathed in fog, it all forms a landscape that borders on the mythical. The best viewpoints are often those found by accident, a bend in the trail where the trees part, a stone outcrop with an unexpected vista, a lone tree standing defiantly against a pale sky. Despite its rising fame among landscape enthusiasts and nature lovers, Yaoshan has managed to retain a sense of quiet dignity. This is due in part to its relatively remote location. Though accessible by road, it requires a willingness to climb, to linger, and to engage with the land on its own terms. Infrastructure is modest. Wooden guest houses run by local families, modest trails, and minimal signage, but that only adds to the sense of immersion. Staying overnight in one of the surrounding Yao or Zhuang villages allows for a deeper connection. Sharing meals cooked over wood fires, listening to folk songs sung under a moonlit sky, and waking to the sound of roosters and distant gongs calling the spirits. And while the world beyond may change at a dizzying pace, Mount Yaoshan remains largely as it has always been, a place where humanity and nature exist not in opposition but in harmony. It is a landscape cultivated by hand and honored by heart, where every ridge tells a story, every terrace holds memory, and every breath of fog carries with it the scent of the eternal. Yaoshan does not shout its wonders. It whispers them, softly, persistently, into the soul of anyone patient enough to listen. Mount Daijun, or Dajianshan, rises dramatically from the subtropical terrain of Guangdong like a solitary stone sentinel, its sharp granite silhouette casting a watchful gaze over the gentle sprawl of coastal lowlands and serpentine river valleys that ripple outward toward the South China Sea. While the province of Guangdong is more widely recognized for its booming cities, historic trade ports, and vibrant Cantonese culture, Mount Daijun stands apart as a profoundly unreal natural monument, an arresting outcrop of stone seemingly sculpted for myth, carved by the slow hand of geologic time into something at once jagged, noble, and strangely timeless. Unlike the forested ranges that dominate much of inland China, Dajianshan is marked by its raw, exposed face, granite carved into vertical cliffs, steep shoulders, and weathered ridgelines that gleam gold and grey under the subtropical sun. The name Daijun itself means great sword, and indeed, when viewed from a distance, the peak cuts a blade-like figure against the sky, especially in the early morning, when its edges catch the sun's first light and cast long shadows over the surrounding wetlands and deltas. It stands alone, unyielding, majestic, and quietly enigmatic. The mountain is rooted near the junction of multiple landscapes, river plains, mangrove forests, and coastal deltas. This proximity to both mountain and sea has long granted Dajianshan a kind of ecological duality. On one side, steep granite walls rise from narrow footpaths lined with vines, banyan trees, and hardy shrubs clinging to the cracks in the stone. On the other, the land rolls outward in slow, wide curves, rice paddies, sugarcane fields, and marshes that stretch all the way to the ocean's salty breath. Mount Daijun is revered locally not only for its natural grandeur but for its cultural significance. Temples dot the mountain's base and occasionally cling to its ledges, sometimes perched so precariously on narrow terraces that they appear to defy gravity. One of the most venerated is the Sanqing Temple, dedicated to the Taoist trinity of deities. Built centuries ago with hand-hewn stone and aged timber, it continues to serve as a place of pilgrimage during certain lunar festivals, drawing both spiritual seekers and local villagers bearing incense and offerings. The path to the temple is a pilgrimage in itself, a steep, winding stair that weaves between boulders, shaded by bamboo and sweet olive trees. Climbing Dajianshan is not simply an ascent of terrain, but of atmosphere. The path leads through several distinct ecological bands, shifting from humid subtropical forest near the base to sparse, almost alpine shrubland at its uppermost ledges. Here, the view opens into a panorama that is uniquely southern Chinese, river deltas shimmering like glass in the distance, their channels dividing the land like veins, fishing boats dotting estuarial waters, villages appearing as white flecks against the deep green. When the air is clear, one can see beyond the Pearl River basin and trace the ghostly contours of distant coastal hills, their outlines softened by sea haze. One of the mountain's most iconic features is the main granite spire, a vertical slab so steep and prominent that it has inspired centuries of poetry and folklore. Locals say it is the petrified sword of a mountain spirit, plunged into the earth to pin down evil winds. Others tell of an immortal hermit who trained here, using the peak's solitude and its proximity to the sea's cleansing breath to cultivate enlightenment. These stories, passed down orally for generations, have etched themselves into the mountain's mythos, giving spiritual texture to its physical presence. Geologically, Mount Daejeon is part of the larger Nanling mountain system, although it stands somewhat apart from the more continuous chains to the north. It is an igneous formation, primarily composed of exposed granite that has resisted erosion far longer than the softer sedimentary rock surrounding it. Over millions of years, wind, rain, and the slow breath of tectonic shifts have carved deep fissures into its flanks, producing sheer drops and jagged ridgelines that challenge even seasoned climbers. At various points, the rock is marked by striations, evidence of ancient glacial scraping and water erosion that speak to the mountain's vast timeline. Despite its dramatic terrain, the biodiversity of Jiangxi is surprisingly rich. The lower regions are home to rare orchids, medicinal herbs, and a variety of subtropical birds, eagles, kingfishers, and the occasional crested serpent eagle soaring along thermal drafts. Small mammals, including civets and muntjacs, inhabit the forests, while monkeys occasionally emerge from the canopy, curious but cautious. On the upper granite faces, lichens paint the rock in hues of green and orange, and the air grows noticeably crisper, tinged with the scent of pine resin and sun-warmed stone. Mount Daejeon is also a place of silence. The cities may lie only hours away, and yet on its slopes, time seems to slow, muffled by wind and stone. Standing near its peak, one can hear little but the faint rush of wind through the cracks, the distant calls of birds, and perhaps, if lucky, the soft toll of a bell drifting from a temple below. In these moments, Jiangxi feels untouched, unreal, part of a world where myth and mountain are one and the same. Yet, despite its wild beauty and cultural depth, Jiangxi remains relatively under-traveled. It does not boast the infrastructure of China's more famous scenic areas. Trails are often narrow and unmarked. There are no glass walkways, no cable cars, no souvenir shops. Visitors must earn the summit with sweat and patience, which makes the experience all the more intimate. It is a place for the solitary traveler, the thoughtful hiker, the seeker of vistas unframed by crowds. Local governments in recent years have made gentle efforts to promote ecotourism around the area, building small wooden viewing platforms and offering guided treks led by villagers who know the land as intimately as family. But even so, the mountain holds on to its silence. It resists being tamed. There is a rawness to Jiangxi, a refusal to perform, which gives it a spiritual resonance rarely found in more commercialized sites. In a province known more for economic pulse than ancient stillness, Mount Daejeon is a rare counterpoint, a place where land tells its own story, unhurried and unchanged. For those who walk its stony ridges, the memory lingers long after the climb is done, of mist curling over granite, of wind whistling between crags, of a sea of green and water stretching outward like time itself. Mount Qingyunji, known poetically as the Green Cloud Steps, is a place where landscape and legend entwine so delicately that even the air feels lyrical. Hidden in the lesser-explored recesses of Jiangxi province, this sacred mountain is as much a spiritual metaphor as it is a physical ascent. It is not one of the celebrated peaks immortalized in national epics or thronged by tourists, but rather a quiet jewel, known mainly to wandering poets, contemplative monks, and those who seek the kind of beauty that whispers instead of shouts. Its very name, Qingyunji, conjures an image of floating stairways bathed in cloudlight, ascending endlessly toward celestial peace. The first approach to Mount Qingyunji does little to prepare the visitor for what awaits above. From a distance, the mountain is modest compared to the towering granite giants of neighboring provinces. But as one draws closer, the poetic architecture of the landscape begins to unfold. Slender pine trees clinging to narrow ridgelines, wisps of mist flowing like silk ribbons through the forest canopy, and ancient stone steps carved directly into the mountain's bones, leading upward in quiet, undulating rhythm. These pine-covered stairs, the namesake steps to heaven, are the soul of Qingyunji. They stretch for kilometers, ascending steadily through groves of old-growth trees whose limbs twist like brushstrokes in a scroll painting. The stones are worn smooth by centuries of pilgrim feet, some cracked, others moss-covered, all radiating the subtle dignity of long passage through time. To climb them is to move both upward and inward. Each turn offers new perspective, a glimpse of a crag through the trees, the echo of birdsong off ancient cliffs, a sudden clearing where one can look out over layers of ridges fading into the misted horizon. The silence here is not empty. It's full, resonant, a silence that listens. There are moments along the trail when all that can be heard is the crunch of gravel underfoot and the wind stirring the pine needles above. And then, like a gentle breath, through an unseen flute, a bamboo wind chime from a hidden shrine trembles in the air, reminding you that even this stillness has a voice. Historically, Mount Qingyunji has long been associated with Taoist mysticism. It is said that reclusive sages once dwelled among its pine-shadowed cliffs, meditating in caves and scrawling calligraphy across stone surfaces with brushes made from fox hair and ink drawn from mineral springs. Unlike the grand Taoist mountains such as Wudang or Qingcheng, Qingyunji was never a center of institutional power or pilgrimage. Instead, it served as a hermit's mountain, a retreat for those seeking solitude, clarity, and the distilled wisdom of nature. Traces of their presence remain scattered across the slopes. Simple stone altars nestled beneath overhangs, fragments of scripture etched into boulders, and quiet sanctuaries hidden in the folds of the terrain. One such sanctuary, the Cloud Ladder Temple, clings to a high ledge shrouded by pine and mist. Built entirely from local stone and weathered wood, it seems to grow out of the mountain itself, more grown than constructed. Inside, incense burns slowly beneath an open skylight, and ancient wind bells tinkle against a backdrop of birdsong and breeze. Legend has it that a monk once climbed to this temple every day at dawn to sweep the steps, 1,200 in total, as an act of devotion, not to keep the path clean, but to keep his mind clear. He believed that the pine needles carried sacred energy, and that by sweeping them he was not erasing nature's presence but aligning it with his own intentions. His story, passed down orally by generations of villagers, reflects the Taoist ideal of harmony rather than domination, of moving with the mountain, not against it. Ecologically, Mount Qingyunji is a small haven of biodiversity. Though modest in elevation, its unique microclimate, shaped by fog-laden winds from the east and rich, loamy soil, supports a wide array of flora. Towering pines dominate the upper slopes, interspersed with ginkgo, azalea, and camellia that bloom in spring with delicate pink and crimson hues. Lower down, the trail is bordered by wild orchids, mossy rocks, and occasional clusters of bamboo that whisper when the wind passes through. In autumn, the mountain transforms into a sea of color, gold, red, orange, made even more dreamlike by the veil of mist that lingers after each rainfall. The wildlife here is equally delicate and elusive. It's not uncommon to hear the distant hoot of an owl or catch sight of a silver pheasant darting across the trail. Squirrels, foxes, and the rare masked palm civet inhabit the shadows, moving quietly through underbrush. Butterflies gather at mineral-rich springs to drink, their wings flickering like living petals. And in quiet pools hidden in crevices, tiny frogs sing a soft chorus as evening descends. Perhaps the most profound aspect of Mount Qingyunji is its emotional architecture, how its form evokes feeling. Unlike the vertical drama of Huangshan or the sheer cliffs of Zhangjiajie, Qingyunji is more intimate, more human in scale. It invites you not to conquer it, but to walk with it. There are no grand viewing platforms or crowded railings here, only quiet clearings where one may sit, breathe, and simply be. The climb does not promise epiphany, but it gently reveals one, slowly, subtly, through the repetition of steps, the rhythm of breath, the falling away of distraction. Even the clouds seem to behave differently here. At dawn, they roll up the valleys in thick curtains, curling through the trees like incense smoke. By midday, they thin into wisps, retreating into the sky and exposing patches of blue. And in the late afternoon, as the sun dips behind the western ridges, the entire mountain often glows, mist catching golden light, steps dappled in shadow and brilliance, the air itself painted with the memory of fire and pine. Visitors who come to Mount Qingyunji often speak of its atmosphere as if it were alive, not in the sense of danger or power, but of presence, of personality. It does not impose itself. It welcomes, watches, waits, and in return, it asks only for awareness, for the walker to notice the sound of their own footsteps, the scent of moss after rain, the way the stairs tilt just slightly with the earth's curve. In a world increasingly obsessed with spectacle, Mount Qingyunji offers instead an invitation to gentleness. It teaches that the most unreal places on earth are not always those that dazzle, but those that remind us how real we are when we pause, look closely, and breathe. Mount Tsuaping, or Qipingshan, lies tucked away in Yunnan's mystifying karst territory, not far from the globally renowned Shilin stone forest. Though often overshadowed by its more famous neighbor, Tsuaping reveals an entirely different personality. Quieter, more abstract, and eerily surreal. It's a place where geology assumes the role of both artist and mystic, where the land seems less like a product of natural formation and more like a landscape conjured from imagination. The word Tsuaping translates roughly to emerald screen, and this poetic name fits the mountain's dreamlike presence. Steep limestone formations rise like frozen waves or jagged scrolls across the hills, their silhouettes softened by mists and dense undergrowth, forming an unreal interplay of stone and shadow. Situated in the heart of Yunnan's Great Karst Basin, Mount Tsuaping is part of a unique geomorphological region shaped by millennia of water and time. Rain has scoured the soluble limestone bedrock into bizarre vertical pinnacles, crevices, and spires, each one utterly unlike the next. From a distance, the mountain resembles a sea of stone trees, jutting skyward like the brushstrokes of a giant celestial calligrapher. Up close, these formations become towering sentinels, their surfaces etched with grooves, scars, and patterns that almost seem intentional, like some forgotten language of stone. What sets Qipingshan apart from other karst zones in Yunnan is its greater serenity and complexity of form. While the Shilin stone forest dazzles with grandeur and vertical drama, Tsuaping seduces with ambiguity. Some formations resemble twisted columns, others mushroom-like caps balanced precariously atop narrow pedestals. In places, entire walls of rock rise in tangled, fang-like barriers, almost too surreal to be natural. Local legends speak of gods and immortals who sculpted these shapes in a single night, playing games with mountains as mortals would shape clay. The trails weaving through Mount Tsuaping are narrow and often cloaked in low-hanging fog, making exploration feel like wandering through a half-remembered dream. Mosses grow thick on the rocks, and vines curl around the limestone spires like green veins winding through a grey heart. The terrain is riddled with grottos and natural arches, many of which remain unnamed and unexplored by casual tourists. Even among those familiar with the area, Tsuaping is considered enigmatic, a mountain that reveals itself only slowly and only to those who linger. The biodiversity in and around Qipingshan adds another layer to its mystique. Despite the rocky substrate, the mountain harbors microecosystems teeming with life. Ferns cling to vertical cliffs. Wildflowers bloom in narrow clefts. Rare orchids emerge from pockets of loam trapped between limestone ridges. Birds such as red-tailed laughing thrushes and blue-winged minlers flit through the canopy, and the haunting call of the black-breasted thrush echoes eerily through narrow gorges. On cooler, misty days, the atmosphere becomes especially ethereal, the silhouettes of birds darting between stone towers, their wings gliding just above the mist, look like fragments from an ink painting brought to life. Archaeologically, Tsuaping holds secrets buried deeper than its stone corridors. Local ethnic communities, particularly the Yi and Soni people, consider parts of the mountain sacred. Small shrines tucked inside natural alcoves still receive offerings, bundles of incense, hand-woven charms, and red cloth strips tied to low-hanging branches. These rituals are ancient and largely undocumented, passed orally through generations, blending animist tradition with syncretic Taoist and Buddhist elements. According to regional myth, Mount Tsuaping once served as a threshold between realms, earth, spirit, and sky. It was not just a physical mountain, but a vertical map of existence. The mountain's cultural associations are strongest during the Ghost Festival, when locals light lanterns and place symbolic food offerings near the rock formations. The flickering lights cast moving shadows across the spires, and the whole mountain takes on an otherworldly glow. Some even claim to hear whispers in the wind during this time, soft voices carried between the pillars like echoes of forgotten ancestors. Though science might dismiss such tales, the mountain's ambience makes belief feel not only plausible, but natural. Perhaps the most distinctive experience Qipingshan offers is the changing light. Sunrise and sunset bring transformations that border on alchemy. In the early morning, the limestone surfaces glow a pale violet as the rising sun slowly burns through the mist. Shadows stretch across the valleys like calligraphy strokes, and the dew-coated rocks glisten like frozen glass. As the sun climbs higher, the mountain seems to retreat inward, the sharp contrasts soften, and everything is bathed in silvery neutrality. But come late afternoon, especially after a light rain, the colors return with force. Green moss flares against dark gray stone, the sky deepens into cobalt, and beams of golden light pierce the canopy in shifting columns. Twilight is perhaps the most magical hour, when the rocks cast elongated shadows like silent giants marching home. From a geological perspective, Suaping is a marvel of slow violence. Its formation owes itself to the same tectonic uplift and erosion cycles that shaped much of the karst plateau. But here, conditions, rainfall, temperature fluctuation, limestone composition, conspired in such a way as to create forms that verge on abstraction. It is a place that seems to defy rules, where gravity itself looks unsure, where straight lines vanish, and where even time feels like it has folded upon itself. Visitors often leave Mount Qipingshan with a strange sense of dislocation. Not confusion, but a quiet stirring of the mind's more poetic faculties. It's not a place to conquer or check off a list. It's a place to wander, to lose track of one's path and thoughts, to feel very small and very alive at once. It does not unfold all at once. It whispers, hides, and offers itself slowly, like an ancient riddle told by the earth. There are no major temples here, no expansive visitor centers or cable cars. And that is precisely its power. In its obscurity, Suaping remains pure, an untamed gallery of natural surrealism. For those seeking the unreal not in spectacle, but in intricacy, in the slow poetry of stone and silence, Qipingshan may be one of the most hauntingly beautiful places in all of China. Mount Qianmu South Peak, nestled in the northern reaches of Zhejiang province near the celebrated cultural city of Hangzhou, is one of those rare mountains where ecological wonder and spiritual heritage intermingle seamlessly. The southern peak of Mount Qianmu, Qianmushan, is less frequented than its northern counterpart, yet it possesses a richness that runs deep, both in terms of biodiversity and cultural resonance. The name Qianmu, meaning eyes of heaven, derives from the twin summits, each holding a lake at its crest, that ancient scholars likened to celestial eyes gazing upon the earth. While the northern peak often draws more visitors due to easier access, the southern peak remains a bastion of tranquility, teeming with lush, old-growth forests and cloaked in mists that seem to drift straight from the folds of time itself. Rising to a height of approximately 1,506 meters, Mount Qianmu South Peak is part of the larger Qianmu mountain range, a vital ecological zone within eastern China and one of the oldest natural reserves in the nation. The forests here are not mere greenery. They are living archives of subtropical biodiversity, home to over 2,000 species of vascular plants and hundreds of rare animal species. Some of the trees on the southern slopes are estimated to be more than 1,000 years old. Towering ginkgos, ironwoods, and Chinese hemlocks dominate the canopy, while a dense undergrowth of ferns, mosses, and orchids blanket the forest floor. This is a sanctuary where nature has not only survived but thrived in complex harmony. Among the mountain's most celebrated inhabitants is the wild Davidia involucrata, or dove tree, also known as the ghost tree due to the fluttering, white bracts that appear like a host of doves suspended in mid-air. These bloom in spring, usually around May, and have drawn botanists and nature lovers from around the world. Qianmu's dove trees are part of what makes this mountain globally significant, as it is one of the few places where this rare and ancient species still flourishes in the wild. Qianmu South Peak is also home to one of China's rarest and most elusive creatures, the clouded leopard, though sightings are exceedingly rare and mostly limited to camera traps deep within the reserve's remote ravines. More commonly seen are macaques, masked palm civets, muntjacs, and a multitude of bird species, including the crested goshawk and the chestnut-bellied tit. The mountain is recognized as an important bird area by BirdLife International, and its fog-wrapped forests make an ideal habitat for species that prefer high-humidity, shaded environments. Yet as much as Qianmu South Peak is revered for its natural assets, it is also deeply tied to China's spiritual and philosophical history. The mountain has long been associated with both Taoist and Buddhist practices. Hidden within its folds are numerous ancient temples, some still active, others reduced to moss-covered ruins overtaken by vines and time. One of the most evocative is the Fahai Temple, dating back to the Tang dynasty. Though largely rebuilt across successive dynasties, it retains an atmosphere of profound solemnity. Stone steps rise through groves of bamboo and ginkgo trees to reach the main hall, where incense burns in slow, curling plumes, mingling with the mist from the forest. It was on these slopes that many hermits, monks, and scholars once chose to retreat, seeking solace from the turbulence of the imperial courts. Poets from the Tang and Song dynasties immortalized the mountain in verse, praising its hidden streams beneath silver leaves, and the wind that speaks in tongues through 10,000 pines. These writings survive in carved tablets and ancient manuscripts, lending an added layer of depth to the visitor's experience. Walking here is like stepping through the pages of a poetic canon that spans centuries. The air on the southern peak is notably crisp and heavy with the scent of damp earth and aromatic pine. The humidity is high, often enveloping the trail in vapor that dims the light and sharpens the scent of wildflowers and decaying leaves. In summer, fireflies dart like embers through the undergrowth, and in winter, the mountain dons a cloak of snow that muffles all sound and transforms the forest into a dreamscape of white silence. Few places in China offer this kind of year-round transformation without losing their essential character. In spring, the mountain comes alive with color. Wild camellias, azaleas, and orchids blossom amid the moss-laden rocks. By autumn, the canopy blazes with hues of red, gold, and amber, reflecting ancient seasonal cycles followed by monks for centuries. Despite its remoteness, the southern peak is not entirely disconnected from the world. Stone pathways and wooden walkways wind through the forest, maintained with respect for the mountain's natural contours. These trails are intentionally minimal. No garish signage or loud commercial installations disturb the landscape. Visitors are encouraged to walk slowly, breathe deeply, and allow the mountain to unfold at its own pace. Meditation platforms built from natural stone invite solitary reflection. There are even quiet tea pavilions where monks and visitors alike sip locally grown Qianmu green tea, a varietal known for its delicate, floral aroma and slightly sweet finish. Importantly, the entire Qianmu area is designated as a UNESCO Man and the Biosphere Reserve. This status underscores its importance as a protected region where human activity is consciously balanced with conservation. Research stations located in deeper, off-limits areas monitor the health of the forest and track the migrations of endangered species. Educational outreach efforts also bring local students and volunteers into the forest for ecological learning and cultural heritage preservation. The ethereal quality of Qianmu South Peak cannot be overstated. Mist rolls in and out with hypnotic rhythm, sometimes obscuring even nearby trees. At dawn, the forest takes on a silver-blue hue as light filters through water droplets suspended in the air. In such moments, the world becomes muted, time seems to hesitate, and one feels the profound silence that ancient Taoist sages equated with the essence of the Tao. It's not unusual for a visitor to stand still beneath a towering tree, surrounded by fog, and feel as though they've crossed into another dimension, one where the boundary between the earthly and the celestial grows thin. Unlike other mountains that overwhelm with altitude or grandeur, Qianmu South Peak seduces with subtlety. It invites rather than demands. It reveals rather than imposes. And for those who walk its paths with patience and reverence, it offers a kind of rare alchemy, a mingling of forest and soul, silence and song, stone and story. Here, the unreal is not always fantastical. Sometimes, it is simply the overwhelming beauty of what has quietly endured. Mount Lushan West Valley, located in the western reaches of Jiangxi province, is a hidden and lesser visited portion of the famed Mount Lushan, associated with Macronen, one of China's most culturally significant and scenically breathtaking mountains. While the eastern and central zones of Mount Lushan, home to iconic landmarks like the Hampa Pass, 5 Old Men Peaks, and the Flower Path, attract thousands of tourists annually, the West Valley remains shrouded in comparative obscurity. And yet, it is precisely this obscurity that protects its most profound charm. A realm of ancient footpaths, shadowed ravines, roaring waterfalls, and untamed natural grandeur rarely touched by modernity. The West Valley is accessed primarily through older pilgrimage routes and rural tracks that skirt around the bustling heart of the Lushan scenic area. Once deep inside, the terrain transforms quickly into a labyrinth of steep cliffs, moss-laden boulders, and sheer gorges veiled in persistent mist. Unlike the polished stone staircases and manicured lookouts common in other parts of the mountain, the West Valley trails are more rugged and primeval. Here, nature reclaims her dominion, roots split stone, vines hang in thick green curtains, and the sound of falling water becomes a constant companion. One of the most enchanting features of this valley is its system of cascading waterfalls. The Lushan region is already renowned for its hydrological richness. Li Bai, the famed Tang dynasty poet, immortalized the Quling waterfall in his verses, but the West Valley possesses falls of a more secluded and wild temperament. Among them is the Shadow Waterfall, Jiangxi Apu, a narrow stream that plunges sharply from a basalt ledge and disappears into a pool surrounded by overhanging ferns and gnarled trees. Its waters are so clear that one can see fish darting through the rocks below, and so cold that even in midsummer, touching it sends a shock through the bones. Then there is the Phoenix Gorge, Fenghuangxia, a ravine so steep and densely wooded that sunlight only reaches its floor in slanted streaks during noon. Walking along the moss-covered stone path carved centuries ago by monks and hermits, one can still see the remains of small meditation alcoves etched into the cliff face. The gorge narrows into a winding slit in the mountainside, where dripping water and ancient roots twist around each other in tangled communion. Birdsong echoes with uncanny clarity here, and the thick fog that frequently envelops the path lends the valley an atmosphere of gentle eeriness, like stepping into a forgotten chapter of a Taoist fable. Though the West Valley is more natural than developed, it is not devoid of human legacy. This area was once a refuge for wandering monks, scholars, and hermits who sought solitude far from the noisy rituals of the main temples. Crumbling pagodas and broken stone lanterns lie hidden beneath thickets of bamboo and bramble. One particularly poignant sight is the remnant steps, Kanti, a mossy stairway believed to have led to a long-lost meditation pavilion. Now half consumed by forest growth, it serves as a testament to impermanence, an idea deeply woven into Chinese Buddhist philosophy. There are also ancient pine trees here, some of them over 600 years old. Their massive trunks twist upward from impossibly sheer cliffs, roots clenched into rock like weathered fingers. These trees are silent witnesses to centuries of snowfall, storms, and sunrises. Many are marked with old Taoist inscriptions, carved with a reverence that suggests the trees themselves were once venerated as spirit guardians of the valley. Visitors often pause beneath these giants in quiet awe, sensing the ageless rhythm of life moving far deeper than the surface of bark and branch. Another defining feature of the West Valley is its network of fog-filled hollows and ridgelines that produce spectacular optical illusions. When the weather is right, especially in early morning, the interaction of mist and filtered light creates the phenomenon known as the Buddha's halo, a multicolored corona that encircles the observer's shadow when projected onto fog or cloud. While this event is rare, those lucky enough to witness it often describe it as a deeply spiritual moment. In traditional Chinese culture, such occurrences are considered auspicious and are sometimes interpreted as signs of enlightenment or harmony with nature. The valley's ecology is just as diverse as its spiritual heritage. Owing to the region's elevation gradient and its unique microclimates, Mount Lushan's western side hosts a rich variety of flora and fauna. Clouded leopards once prowled these forests, though they are now critically endangered or locally extinct. More commonly seen are masked civets, Chinese serows, and various species of salamanders that thrive in the valley's clear mountain pools. Ferns as tall as a person and wild camellias in vivid reds and pinks flourish in the cooler zones, while bamboo forests give way to rhododendron thickets at higher altitudes. The West Valley is also a place where time seems suspended. The persistent mist, the stillness broken only by birdsong or falling water, and the slow progression of ancient paths all encourage a kind of temporal drift. Hours seem to pass like minutes, and a simple walk through a ravine becomes a journey inward as much as it is forward. Here, the ancient ideal of shan shui, mountain and water landscapes, revered in Chinese painting and poetry, comes alive in tangible form. Artists and poets have drawn inspiration from Lushan for millennia, and while most focused on its more famous viewpoints, the raw spirit of the West Valley is perhaps closer to the heart of that aesthetic, untouched, ephemeral, and deeply harmonious. In the modern era, some conservationists and eco-tourism advocates have begun to promote the West Valley as a model for sustainable tourism. Because of its comparative inaccessibility, the number of visitors remains low, which helps preserve its fragile ecosystems. The local authorities, aware of the need to balance heritage with protection, have placed limits on new development and encourage only minimal-impact infrastructure. Simple wooden walkways, stone markers, and eco-lodges that blend into the environment. Walking through Mount Lushan West Valley is less about ticking off scenic spots and more about rediscovering the pace of nature. It is the kind of place that rewards attentiveness, the way dew gathers on a spider's web, the scent of wet stone after rainfall, the flicker of a red dragonfly beneath the canopy. It is unreal not because it is fantastical, but because it quietly transcends modern life. It asks nothing from its visitors but presence, and in return, offers glimpses into an older, deeper world where every leaf and stone hums with quiet significance. For those seeking to escape the artificial, the manufactured, and the hurried, the West Valley of Mount Lushan stands as a rare sanctuary, a place where time folds, spirit stirs, and the mountain watches, patiently, silently, as it always has. Mount Jinggang, or Jiangxi, in Jiangxi province, is a name that resonates across China not just for its natural splendor, but for its profound historical significance. Revered as the cradle of the Chinese Revolution, this mountain range became the first rural revolutionary base of the Chinese Red Army under Mao Zedong in the late 1920s. Yet beyond the chapters inked in history books and the ideological symbolism that defines modern China's memory, Jiangxi is a landscape of towering green peaks, forested gorges, winding streams, and hidden waterfalls, a terrain as stirring in its beauty as it is in its revolutionary legacy. The Jinggang Mountains sit at the crossroads of Jiangxi and Yunnan provinces, forming a lush and rugged terrain within the Luoxiao mountain range. With elevations reaching over 1,800 meters, the region is characterized by steep ridgelines, densely forested valleys, and a rich array of biodiversity. Its strategic location, nestled deep within remote mountains, made it an ideal stronghold for early revolutionary forces. Difficult to access, easy to defend, and bountiful in natural resources. It was here in 1927 that Mao Zedong and Zhu De began forging the tactics of rural guerrilla warfare that would eventually lead to the foundation of the People's Republic of China. Yet when the political lens is momentarily lifted, what one finds is a remarkably pristine environment, full of mist-veiled forests, crystalline springs, and cliff-lined paths where wildflowers bloom in spring and golden foliage carpets the landscape in autumn. The same mist that once shielded revolutionaries from aerial detection now softens the ridges in early morning light, turning the mountains into an ethereal painting of drifting silhouettes and light-kissed treetops. At the heart of Jiangxi lies the majestic Huangyangji, a dramatic mountain pass that stands as both a scenic marvel and a historic battlefield. The cliffs here fall away into deep ravines cloaked in thick pine and fir, and a narrow trail leads up to an old lookout post that provides sweeping vistas of the surrounding valleys. This very spot was the site of the famous 1928 battle in which the Red Army successfully defended their base against a far superior Kuomintang force. Today, a large monument and engraved stone commemorate the event, but the trail to the summit remains a silent witness, its craggy stones and whispering pines telling tales more ancient and more quiet than the revolution. Elsewhere on the mountain, one finds the Wuji Peak, or Five Fingers Peak, named for its 5 jagged spires that resemble an outstretched hand. These granite summits pierce the clouds and are often shrouded in drifting mists, creating an illusion of floating above the earth. The climb to these peaks is arduous, involving old footpaths hewn from stone and narrow ridges bordered by wild rhododendron. Yet reaching even one of the fingers rewards the hiker with a view over seemingly endless waves of green hills, broken only by distant villages and ribbons of cloud. The valleys below the peaks are no less captivating. Streams like the Dajing River wind through bamboo groves and terraces of flowering shrubs. In the warmer months, the air is filled with the sound of cicadas, birdsong, and the distant roar of waterfalls tumbling down mossy cliffs. One of the most picturesque of these falls is the Longtan Waterfall, or Dragon Pool Falls, a multi-tiered cascade that crashes down a rock face into a crystal-clear pool encircled by dense ferns and wildflowers. The scene feels untouched, primal, even mythic, as if the mountain still guards its secrets in echoing water and whispering wind. Jiangxi is also a botanical sanctuary. Owing to its subtropical climate and relative isolation, the region hosts over 4,000 plant species, including rare orchids, ancient ginkgos, and mountain camellias. Red maples blaze across the slopes in autumn, creating a landscape of vivid reds and golds that contrast starkly with the evergreens. The forests are also home to a variety of animals, from clouded leopards and golden pheasants to monkeys and small forest deer. For ecologists and biologists, this region is a treasure trove of endemic life forms and natural succession zones. Culturally, Jiangxi offers a complex fusion of natural and revolutionary heritage. The local villages still maintain traditional Hakka-style architecture, sturdy wooden homes with tiled roofs, nestled among rice terraces and tea fields. In places like Tsiping Town, the heart of modern-day Jiangxi tourism, visitors find museums, memorials, and preserved residences of revolutionary figures. But just a short distance beyond, these towns dissolve into mist-wrapped trails and serene temples tucked into forest clearings. One such place is the quiet and contemplative Huangyang Buddhist temple, perched on a hill above a tea valley. Though modest in size, its incense-filled courtyards and mossy stone lanterns convey a peaceful atmosphere rarely disturbed by crowds. The monks here chant sutras daily, and the sound carries across the valley like a ribbon of memory winding through time, a striking contrast to the turbulent past of the region. Throughout the mountain range, relics from the revolutionary era are subtly interwoven into the fabric of the natural environment. Stone sentry posts, simple bunkers carved into rock faces, old footbridges, and lookout points still dot the trails. Unlike many modern war memorials, these are unadorned and austere, often half reclaimed by nature. They do not shout, they simply remain, as part of the terrain, a reminder that the land itself has borne witness to both bloodshed and rebirth. The experience of walking through Jiangxi today is both physical and meditative. The terrain demands engagement. Narrow cliffside paths, switchback forest routes, and sudden rises in elevation challenge the body while encouraging introspection. It is easy to see how, for the early revolutionaries, this place became more than a military outpost. It was a crucible of ideas, shaped as much by hardship as by awe for the mountains around them. It is also clear why, today, it continues to inspire not only pilgrims of ideology but seekers of solitude, beauty, and meaning. In recent years, efforts have been made to preserve both the ecological integrity and the historical significance of Jiangxi. While sections of the mountain are open to controlled tourism, vast areas remain under strict conservation. Eco-trails, educational initiatives, and sustainable lodging are being developed with an eye toward balance. The mountain is not just a relic of the past, it is a living, breathing entity, one that continues to evolve. Jiangxi defies simple classification. It is at once a sacred forest, a fortress, a garden, a memory, and a mountain. Its peaks have echoed with gunfire and bird call, its gorges have hidden men and gods, and its ridgelines have seen both revolution and rebirth. In a nation of countless sacred and scenic peaks, Jiangxi stands apart not only for its role in history but for the way it encapsulates the spirit of transformation, of nature, of nation, and of the human heart. Mount Shiren, or Shirinshan, rises in the western part of Henan province like an ancient sentinel carved by time and legend. The name Shiren translates to Stone Man Mountain, a reference not only to the massive vertical rock pillars that dominate its skyline, but also to a deep-rooted mythology surrounding stone figures and spirits that guard the land. Among the many mountains of China, Shirinshan stands apart for its arresting geology, a world of red sandstone cliffs, labyrinthine gorges, and towering rock spires that seem to defy gravity, and for its spiritual heritage, with centuries-old temples embedded in rock and cloud alike. Located in the southern reaches of Henan, in Lushan County near the boundary with Hebei, Mount Shiren is part of the larger Funyo mountain range. It is an extension of the Great Qinling system, which divides northern and southern China ecologically and culturally. But unlike the more famed summits of that spine, Shirinshan remains relatively underappreciated by mainstream tourism, which only serves to preserve its tranquil and untamed essence. The elevation here peaks around 2,000 meters, with the landscape carved into a jagged and dramatic display of red and ochre sandstone cliffs that glow warmly at sunrise and flame brilliantly at sunset. The first thing a visitor notices at Shirinshan is the color: deep rust-red rock faces towering above lush green valleys, streaked with vertical fissures and weathered grooves, some like flutes, others like scales of mythical creatures. In spring, the mountains burst into bloom, with rhododendrons, azaleas, and wild cherries clinging improbably to cliff edges. In autumn, the forest canopy burns with fiery hues of crimson and gold, mirroring the stone itself. Fog often rolls in during the early morning, swirling through valleys and wrapping around the ridgelines, giving the mountain a mystical and dreamlike quality. Geologically, Mount Shiren is a masterpiece of nature's erosion. Over millions of years, tectonic uplift, wind, and water have carved its red sedimentary rock into vertical cliffs, narrow crevices, and isolated stone towers. Some formations appear as though colossal figures had been turned to stone in the middle of movement, giving rise to the name Stone Man. Locals speak of these rock forms as spirits petrified for disobedience or loyalty, depending on the tale, and many have been given names like General's Helmet, Sleeping Buddha, or Giant's Foot. The resemblance is uncanny in some cases, lending credence to the folklore that wraps this place in eternal mystery. Woven among the cliffs and forests are a number of ancient temples, many dating back to the Tang and Song dynasties. The most renowned is the Nanhai Temple, perched dramatically on a craggy ridge and partially built into the rock face. Reaching it requires ascending a series of steep stone steps that zigzag up the cliff, flanked by dense pine and cypress. The climb is as much a journey through history as it is through nature. Along the way, one passes stone tablets engraved with faded sutras, moss-covered shrines, and meditation caves carved into the mountain itself. Once atop the temple's terraces, visitors are met with a panoramic view that stretches across layered valleys and rolling foothills. The wind carries the scent of pine resin and incense, and the sounds of bells and chanting drift from the temple interior, where monks still keep a quiet rhythm of prayer and maintenance. Inside, stone statues of bodhisattvas, weathered yet serene, sit beneath intricately painted ceilings that depict dragons, lotuses, and celestial guardians. Some statues are believed to have been carved from the very rock of the mountain, linking the temple literally and symbolically to the land it occupies. One of the more hidden gems within the region is the Stone Buddha Gorge, a narrow ravine where weathered cliffs loom on both sides and an ancient, faint path hugs the stone wall above a cascading stream. Along the gorge, tiny Buddhist carvings can be found tucked into the rock, some no larger than a palm, others life-sized, many worn smooth by centuries of exposure and rainfall. According to local oral traditions, monks used this gorge for meditative walks, believing the flowing water and natural acoustics of the canyon aided in spiritual purification. Beyond the temples and cliffs, Mount Shiren also offers an abundance of ecological diversity. As part of a transitional zone between temperate north and subtropical south, the flora includes both northern conifers and southern broadleaf evergreens. Chestnut trees, wild apricots, ancient firs, and medicinal herbs grow in abundance. The region is home to numerous bird species, including the striking golden pheasant and mountain thrush, as well as elusive mammals like wild boars, foxes, and even leopards, though sightings of the latter are increasingly rare. The human history here, too, is etched deeply into the rock. During times of war and upheaval, including the Tang dynasty rebellions and later the Mingqing transition, hermits, scholars, and fugitives found refuge in the folds of Shirinshan's cliffs. Some left behind writings carved into stone, poems etched in brushstroke-like characters, recounting their grief, hopes, or philosophical ruminations on impermanence. These inscriptions can still be found along hidden paths, often half-covered by moss, waiting to be rediscovered by wanderers and seekers. Interestingly, the mountain is also the subject of Taoist mythology. Some believe Shirinshan to be a place where heaven and earth converge, a kind of threshold for spiritual ascent. The terrain, with its frequent fog and vertiginous peaks, reinforces this sense of boundary between the human and the divine. Pilgrims historically climbed the mountain not only to visit temples but to perform rituals seeking guidance, healing, or longevity. This mystical dimension still pulses beneath the modern hiking trails and scenic overlooks. Today, efforts are being made to develop Mount Shiren as an ecotourism and cultural heritage site while preserving its wild character. Wooden pathways have been built to reduce erosion, while conservation teams monitor rare plant species and maintain temple structures. Yet despite this growing attention, Shirinshan remains far less commercialized than many of China's other famous mountains. A gift for those who value quiet, rugged beauty and deeper encounters with landscape and story. To walk the slopes of Mount Shiren is to walk not only through a forest of stone but through layers of time. It is to trace the outlines of vanished dynasties and the footfalls of sages, to read scripture written in rock and cloud. It is a place where nature writes poetry in scarlet cliffs and where temples cling like thoughts to the edge of consciousness. In this landscape of legends and vertical wonder, the stone men still stand, silent, timeless, waiting. Mount Lupan, or Lupanshan, rises like a green spine slicing through the southern part of Ningxia and extending into the borderlands of Gansu. Often referred to as the Green Island of the Lurs Plateau, Lupan Mountain is not just a geographical anomaly in a landscape dominated by yellow earth and dry winds. It is a living corridor of forest, history, and cultural memory. Narrow, undulating, and richly vegetated, this mountain range has long served as both sanctuary and passageway, especially during some of the most pivotal moments in modern Chinese history. Its fame, however, is tied inseparably to the Long March, the epic retreat of the Chinese Red Army between 1934 and 1936. Lupanshan was one of the final, decisive obstacles that Mao Zedong and his troops had to cross before reaching their revolutionary base in Shanbei. It was on the slopes of Liupan that Mao, weary yet inspired, composed his famous poem Qingpingyu, Liupan Mountain, which immortalized the landscape in verse. The sky is high, the clouds are pale. We watch the wild geese vanish southward. If we fail to reach the Great Wall, we are not true men. This small fragment of poetry, still remembered across generations, captures the emotional resonance of the mountain, a place where grit, vision, and the vastness of the natural world converge. For those retracing history, this moment echoes powerfully against the quiet green ridges and thick mists that sometimes blanket the upper slopes. Geographically, Mount Liupan stretches for about 240 kilometers, with elevations ranging from 2,000 to 2,900 meters. Its sinuous form creates a rare oasis of subtropical broadleaf forest in an otherwise semi-arid, loess-covered region. This stark contrast is visible even from satellite imagery, a narrow band of deep green threading through a palette of beige and gold. The ecological uniqueness of Liupanshan has led to its nickname the Green Pearl of the Northwest. The forest here is dense and diverse. Ancient spruce, larch, pine, and birch trees form a rich canopy under which grow ferns, wild herbs, orchids, and mosses. Many of the plant species are relict from the Tertiary period, surviving glacial ages and desertification alike thanks to the elevation, moisture, and topographical variety. Liupan is also one of the most critical watersheds in northern China, feeding numerous tributaries of the Yellow River and supporting agriculture downstream. This mountain is home to a variety of rare wildlife, including golden eagles, black bears, musk deer, and leopards. Conservationists regard it as a biodiversity hotspot, and parts of the range have been designated as protected national nature reserves. With the changing seasons, the mountains put on dramatic displays. Spring explodes with blossoms and migratory birds. Summer is a green refuge from the surrounding heat. Autumn cloaks the forest in amber and russet, and winter coats the ridges in a pristine snow cover that silences all sound but wind. Culturally, Liupan is steeped in ethnic diversity, acting as a home or passage for Hui Muslims, Han Chinese, and various minority groups. The villages that dot its foothills are repositories of traditional architecture and folk customs. Small mosques, earthen-walled houses, and open markets offering halal delicacies, smoked lamb, hand-pulled noodles, and local honey enrich the human texture of the region. Though most visitors come today either for ecotourism or revolutionary tourism, Liupan also has older spiritual significance. Taoist and Buddhist hermitages once existed in its secluded crags and ancient trails, some of them likely trade routes used by Silk Road caravans heading from Lebanon westward, still thread through the woods and over the ridges. This combination of sacred, strategic, and ecological value gives the mountain an aura of layered meaning. One of the most notable sites within the Liupan range is the Liupan Mountain Revolutionary Memorial, a somber yet inspiring tribute to the Red Army's arduous journey. Visitors can explore the Long March Museum, walk along restored sections of the Army's old path, and visit the stone where Mao is said to have sat composing his poetry. Bronze statues of weary soldiers stare upward toward the mountain crest, as if still climbing, still dreaming. In more recent years, Liupan has become a model for environmental restoration. Once affected by deforestation and overgrazing, the mountain is now the focus of aggressive reforestation projects under China's Grain for Green policy. Terrace slopes have been converted back into forests, and efforts to control soil erosion have paid off, helping to stabilize local climate and water systems. The growing network of eco-trails, scenic overlooks, and educational centers provides a sustainable model for tourism in fragile mountain ecosystems. What makes Liupan especially compelling, however, is the sense of symbolic ascent it still offers. Unlike other famous mountains in China, which are often topped with temples or shrines, Liupanshan culminates in remembrance, in resilience, in an idea that through hardship and perseverance, one ascends not only in altitude, but in spirit. The peak known as Jujia Mountain, the highest point of Liupan at over 2,900 meters, is less a summit of stone than one of memory. There, at sunrise, the golden light spreads like ink across the ridgelines, igniting valleys below and touching the tips of the tallest firs. The wind whispers through the forest, echoing the footsteps of thousands who passed through this crucible of revolution, quietly reminding each visitor of how landscape and destiny once intertwined on this very soil. To journey into Mount Liupan is to traverse a rare band of green across a sea of yellow, to walk among towering trees that stood witness to endurance, poetry, and transformation. Whether one comes to Liupan as a pilgrim of history, a seeker of nature, or simply a traveler in or of China's unreal geography, the mountain responds with depth and dignity. It is not just a waypoint of the long march, it is a summit of China's living memory, veiled in mist and carved into legend. Mount Hongya, or Hongyushan, stands as a crimson sentinel along the threshold where the lush heart of China begins to yield to the vast arid frontiers of the northwest. Tucked within the western reaches of Gansu province, this striking mountain is named after the deep red cliffs and escarpments that glow like fire. At sunset, it is a place where color, geology, history, and harsh elemental beauty converge, forming a landscape both hauntingly barren and unexpectedly spiritual. Unlike the densely forested and mist-shrouded peaks of eastern and southern China, Mount Hongya reveals its bones plainly. Exposed layers of sedimentary rock, tilted and fractured by millennia of tectonic upheaval, etched by wind and water into jagged ridges, canyons, and monumental stone faces. These red rock walls, often iron-rich and oxidized to a deep vermilion, burn with intensity under the low-angled light of evening, giving the entire mountain the appearance of a giant altar set ablaze. Geographically, Hongyushan lies near the northern edge of the Heshi Corridor, a critical section of the ancient Silk Road. This proximity to one of history's great conduits of commerce and culture imbues the region with echoes of camel caravans, desert outposts, and windswept Buddhist stupas. While not as immediately famous as neighboring landmarks like Dunhuang or the Chilean mountains, Mount Hongya forms an essential part of the same geological and cultural tapestry. The terrain here is rough, dry, and monumental. Steep ridgelines rise from gravel plains and semi-desert scrublands. Canyons, formed by seasonal torrents, cut deeply through the red sandstone. The occasional poplar grove, irrigation-fed and planted by human hands, offers shade and contrast, but nature reigns supreme, austere, silent, and ever-changing under the open sky. During winter, a thin crust of snow may settle on the rocks, turning the landscape into a surreal canvas of white and rust. In spring, hardy alpine flowers and scrub grasses bloom briefly in defiance of the arid soil. But it is the sunset spectacle that gives Mount Hongya its ethereal allure. As daylight fades, the cliffs, already richly colored, begin to shimmer in hues of amber, blood orange, and rose. The mountain seems to ignite from within, casting long shadows over the foothills while the sky overhead takes on deep purples and firelit reds. This spectacle of color and silence makes Hongyushan one of the most visually poetic landscapes in all of Gansu, if not all of China. Despite its visual drama, Mount Hongya remains largely undiscovered by mass tourism. This is both a challenge and a gift. There are few roads, fewer amenities, and almost no crowds. But for those willing to travel rough and step off the beaten path, the mountain offers raw, unfiltered encounters with a side of China that feels timeless and mythic. One of the most unique features of Hongyushan is its ancient cave dwellings and rock-cut shrines, many now eroded or hidden by time. These hollows, often found in sheltered niches of the Red Cliffs, were likely used by both religious hermits and early frontier communities. Local oral tradition speaks of Buddhist monks and Taoist recluses who once sought refuge in these stone chambers, meditating beneath prayer flags or carved symbols long since worn away by wind. Nearby, small desert temples and steles bear witness to centuries of cultural fusion and decay. Here, Han Chinese script appears beside Tibetan motifs and traces of Central Asian artistic influences, a reminder that the mountain once stood as a crossroads, a place where silk, belief, language, and power intersected. Archaeological digs in the region have unearthed Tang and Ming dynasty relics, suggesting that pilgrims and merchants alike once passed this way. Today, local communities still revere the mountain, though more quietly. Ethnic Hui Muslims, Han farmers, and nomadic herders all inhabit the fringes of the range, living in modest earth brick homes or yurts near the river valleys. Livelihoods depend on sheep herding, goat farming, and dryland agriculture, crops like wheat, potatoes, and beans stubbornly coaxed from the dust. During festivals or market days, traditional music and food return vibrancy to the isolated settlements. One of the most beautiful parts of the mountain is the Hongya Pass, a natural saddle between two main ridgelines that opens up sweeping views of both the desert steppe to the north and the folded hills to the south. Wind howls through the pass in the afternoons, shaping the landscape and etching away at the ancient rocks like a sculptor's hand. From this point, travelers often describe a feeling of standing at the edge of two worlds. the cultivated east behind them and the wild frontiers stretching endlessly ahead. In recent years, there has been a modest push toward eco-cultural tourism, with Gansu's provincial planners recognizing the growing appeal of unreal natural sites like Hongyushan. Basic trails and stone steps have been built in some sections to allow for safe climbing and photography. One especially popular path leads to the Flame Ridge Lookout, where the sunset view is at its most dramatic. Here, photographers wait in silence as the sun drops behind the western rim, bathing the entire valley in molten light. Despite development, Hongyushan retains its sense of remoteness and purity. There are no gift shops, no shuttle buses, no commercial distractions. Just rock, light, air, and memory. In a nation filled with sacred peaks, green terraces, and watery wonderlands, Mount Hongya stands apart. It is not lush or legendary in the traditional sense. It is harsh, exposed, and emotionally raw. But it is precisely this honesty, this visceral openness, that makes it feel sacred. It asks nothing of the traveler but presence. It reveals everything in color and silence. For those who stand atop its wind-scraped cliffs as the last light fades, the world feels suddenly older, simpler, and deeper. The mountain, its fire-hued walls glowing in memory long after the sun disappears, leaves an imprint not just on the eyes, but on the spirit. Mount Tsangyan, or Kangyanshan, rises from the green heart of southern Hebei province, not with violent grandeur or towering heights, but with a quiet, almost cinematic elegance. Nestled near the city of Sichuan, this mountain is one of those rare places where the intersection of architecture, nature, and spiritual legacy has created something that feels almost otherworldly. A physical space that seems born of a dream, suspended between heaven and earth. Its name, literally meaning Blue Rock Mountain, is a poetic reference to the tranquil, jade-colored stone and cliffs that dominate its profile. While not one of China's tallest peaks, its cultural impact and visual drama easily rival that of more famous sacred mountains like Tai or Hua. What sets Kangyanshan apart is not its elevation, but what has been built into it, especially the architectural marvel known as the Bridge Tower Hall, a structure so astonishing in design that it has been featured in numerous Chinese historical dramas, martial arts films, and international cinema, including scenes from the Hollywood epic Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon. The most iconic image of Mount Tsangyan is that of the stone arch bridge that spans two sheer cliffs high above the forested valley below. Perched delicately upon this bridge is a majestic wooden temple pavilion, part of a larger Taoist Buddhist complex that seems to defy gravity and reason. The bridge and temple appear as if they floated there on mist, timeless and untouched. The cliffs to which the bridge is anchored are vertical, scarred with age, and cloaked in pine and mist. Below, streams run over polished rocks, and forest paths twist through cool glades filled with bamboo, azalea, and ginkgo. Historically, Mount Tsangyan has been a place of retreat, worship, and wonder for centuries. The original construction of the temples and religious halls is believed to have begun during the Sui dynasty, 581 to 618 CE, with major expansions and embellishments during the Tang, Song, and Ming dynasties. Throughout imperial times, it was visited by monks, sages, scholars, and even emperors who sought both religious merit and inspiration. Legends speak of princesses turned nuns, immortal recluses, and wandering sages who found enlightenment in these pine-scented heights. The Bridge Tower Hall itself, arguably the heart of the entire site, is a structural and spiritual masterpiece. Built during the Sui dynasty, it combines Taoist symbolism and Buddhist artistry, with elaborately carved eaves, dragon motifs, and hanging incense spirals within. The bridge it rests upon is carved from natural stone and arched to perfection, allowing the temple to sit at the highest point like a crown. It is not merely a feat of engineering, it is an act of reverence, a bridge not only between cliffs but between the earthly and the divine. Visitors often find themselves awestruck upon approaching it, not only because of its precarious beauty but because of the dreamlike silence that surrounds it. Birdsong echoes from the forests, and the wind moves gently through the ancient cypress trees. During certain seasons, especially autumn, the landscape is transformed into a canvas of red, gold, and orange, a dramatic counterpoint to the cool grey of the stone and the earthy reds of the wooden beams. As one ascends toward the summit, there are several other temples, pavilions, and halls worth exploration. The Hall of the Arhats, Sanskrit Scripture Pavilion, and Thousand Buddha Hall are scattered strategically along the slopes and cliffs, built with a natural harmony that respects both spiritual tradition and the contours of the mountain itself. The layout follows the ancient Chinese geomantic principles of feng shui, ensuring that energy flows through the site in balance, from the gushing streams below to the sky-touched terraces above. The pilgrimage path leading up the mountain is steep but scenic, lined with stone steps worn smooth by generations, guardian lion statues, and forested switchbacks. The journey is not merely physical, it's meant to be meditative. Each curve in the path, each gate passed, represents a deeper movement inward. By the time a traveler reaches the bridge temple, they are not just arriving at a structure, they are arriving at a state of mind. From the upper pavilions, one can look out across a landscape of folded hills and forested ridges, where the early morning mist swirls like ocean waves. The mountain's profound quietude is broken only by the rustling of trees, the rhythmic ringing of prayer bells, or the chants of the occasional monk still inhabiting the site's monastic quarters. Kangyinshan remains an active religious site, though now more peaceful than populated. Rituals, seasonal festivals, and offerings still occur, especially during the Lunar New Year and Mid-Autumn Festival, when locals from nearby villages come bearing incense and fruit. But perhaps what is most remarkable about Mount Sangyan is that it has remained relatively untouched by commercial overdevelopment. While modern amenities such as a cable car and paved access roads exist for convenience, the spirit of the mountain, its deep serenity and sacred ambience, has not been eclipsed by noise or neon. The caretakers of the site, many of whom are descendants of temple keepers or local families, maintain a balance between accessibility and reverence. Moreover, Kangyinshan stands as a living reminder of China's spiritual plurality, where Taoism, Buddhism, Confucianism, and even folk religion coexist not in conflict, but in layered harmony. The architecture, inscriptions, and rituals of the mountain all reflect this rich syncretism, making it not just a place of beauty, but a repository of the Chinese soul, philosophical, poetic, and enduring. And for those who arrive as tourists but leave as pilgrims, the mountain offers more than scenery. It offers stillness. It offers mystery. It offers a chance to stand at the center of something eternal and real, to cross that narrow stone bridge between two cliffs and, just for a moment, feel suspended between earth and sky, time and breath. This video is for educational or entertainment purposes only, and information provided in the video may be incorrect. If you enjoyed the video, consider subscribing to the channel and like the video.